For a deed to be valid, a competent what?
C.
Grantor and two witnesses must sign the instrument, and it is B as in Bravo. Remember, the grantee, the party receiving the deed, does not have to be competent nor sign. No worries. Number 4, the type or form of deed most commonly used to clear clouds on title of real property is it's the D as in Delta quitclaim deed. Remember, this one is unique from the rest. The quitclaim deed does not have any warranty of title, so there's no protection if this deed is given to you. And it has no covenant of season or the season clause. We'll have a question about that in just a moment. It's actually question number 10. What is the season clause?
But basically guarantee that you have the right. You own the property.
It's a promise, exactly, that the grantor, the person giving the deed, is the rightful owner and therefore has the right to transfer title to another person. But the quitclaim does not have that promise. So those of you who own property, I can sign a quitclaim deed for your property. Because with this deed, I don't have to swear I own your property. I could use it to quit a claim I have to your property. And that's exactly like the pool company that constructed the pool. You didn't pay them the remaining balance. They place a lien against your property. Liens are claims. And to remove that claim, you pay what's owed, negotiate a settlement between you and the pool company, and in exchange, get them to sign the quit claim deed. They're quitting the claim they have to your property. So it could be used to clear title, ownership rights of that type of cloud. A lien is a cloud, a judgment, cloud, defect, title issues. Anyhow, the bargain and sale deed, it does have the covenant of season. So you can only use that deed for transfer of title from one company or individual to another. Can't be used to quit other types of claims. That's a quitclaim deed. But it has no warranty as to the quality of title that's being given to you, no protection. The special warranty, I think the name gives it away, specific warranty, right? Means you do have protection, but it's very limited. It's only protection against defects caused by the grantor while they owned it, not owners before them, issues they may have caused with the title or further assurance. So it's limited in that respect. And we'll have a question about that in just a moment. And then the general warranty comes with the greatest degree of protection. Past, present, and it's the only one that provides further assurance. This is how they describe future protection. So the grantor, the person who gives you a warranty deed, is saying, I'm going to forever protect you against any lawful claims made against this property, any title defects, to give you clear title once again. That's just a quick review of those various deeds that could be used here in Florida. 5, if the sale contract does not specify the type of deed to be delivered, the seller is required to provide a general, which is the most amount of protection, which is the one you want, and luckily it's the one you'll get if not specified otherwise. 6, the process of taking property under the power of eminent domain is called C, condemnation. Think of them condemning your property. This will help you remember. 7, the type of deed in which the grantor does not warrant the title in any manner except against the grantor's acts or their representatives is the B, special warranty. The covenant against encumbrances in a deed is designed to guarantee that the A, grantor has not jeopardized the title in any manner except as noted on the deed. But of course, you should still pay for what service to do your research. Title search and then also on top of that to further protect title insurance. And we'll have a question about that in just a moment. That's the next one. This is literally the next question. In answering questions pertaining to quality of title, real estate licensees, how should you react? B, longest answer. Advise them to seek out a title company, or could be a lawyer, to render an opinion of title and to further protect themselves, purchase title insurance. There's 2 policies of title insurance. We'll talk about the major difference between those 2 policies in just a moment. 10, the season clause in a deed specifies D, grantor actually owns the property, therefore has the right to sell it or transfer it, really, convey. Number 11, the provision in a deed that names the parties and contains a granting clause is the A premises section. A is an alpha. 12, a developer states that homes in a specified development cannot be less than 1,800 square feet. This is an example of what? It is C, subdivision restrictive covenant, rules that affect an entire community of homes. A deed restriction affects one particular property. An example of an encumbrance on title to real property does not include D, which is just the premises section within a deed. 14, the lender's title insurance policy is issue for?
C.
It is C, loan balance and is transferable. The owner's policy is not transferable. Unless you pass away, then your legal heirs can inherit that policy to protect them against unexpected risks, something that wasn't revealed when you paid for that title search, like a forged deed signature. 15, which lien is first in priority to be paid? It's A, property taxes, top of the list, superior liens. 16 is math, so take out your calculator. A business has a 5-year variable lease for a suite and office park. The first year of the lease calls for rent of $21.50 a square foot based on an index of 189. The index increases to 195 at the beginning of the second year. What's the adjusted or new rental rate? Well, let me show you real quick. So it's a variable lease, right? And the first step is to divide the new index by the original. What's the new index? They tell us 195. You simply take that and divide it by the original, which they tell us 189, and do the math. And I think you should get 1.0317, something like that. We'll do the math together. So take 195 divided by 189. And yes, 1.03. Just leave it in your calculator, because what's the next step? Take that result that's already in your calculator and multiply it by the original rent, which they told us is $21.50. That means our adjusted or new rental rate, when you do that math, I'll do the math here, 21.5 or $21.50. And you get your new or adjusted rental rate round to the nearest cent, since we're talking about money, 22.18. Does that match up with A, B, C, or D? Yes, so the correct answer is A for that reason. Any questions? Did I lose anybody in this explanation? I'm happy to hear that. And wasn't somebody in here a little bit? If we just start with just give me a clean slate, and I'll show you how simple this stuff could be. But we just got to take it one day at a time. All right. And then you got to challenge yourself with it. Luckily, you're doing the work. That's the difference maker. If you don't do the work, then at the end, you'll be like, oh my gosh, I'm confused. I don't remember that. Well, you got to challenge yourself. And these are the best ways to challenge yourself with these state exam type questions. 17, a married couple signed a contract to purchase a home in a residential subdivision. When they had the lot surveyed before closing, they discovered that the contractor had built the neighbor's garage 3 inches inside the west boundary of their lot. The garage in its present location is an example of, it's an encroachment, which is unauthorized use of somebody's property for a specific and limited purpose. However, if that encroachment exists for, same as squatters' rights, how many years? 7 years. It's no longer unauthorized. An encroachment turns into authorized use, which is an easement, but it's called an implied easement after 7 years. Not to be confused with the next question. 18, when a pathway has been used, authorized use of somebody's property for over 20 years, then it becomes permanent as an easement by prescription, yes. Do you understand the difference? An encroachment is unauthorized. But if it goes unauthorized for 7 years, then it turns into authorized, permanent authorized. This one's different. It starts off as authorized. You allowed somebody, kids, to cut through the back portion of your lot. And if it happens for over 20 years, then you can no longer deny their access for that specific easement. Soon after a man's death, the deed was discovered in his desk, and the deed is for the man's home. It was deeded to a charity. The man is survived by his son, who discovered the deed. The man died intestate. What does intestate mean? With or without a will? Without a will. Based on this information, and for a couple of reasons, the correct answer is the property belongs to who?
C.
It's C as in Charlie. The legal heir, because a deed was never delivered to the charity accepted by them. Remember that you can't complete voluntary delivery and acceptance beyond your passing, unless you have a will, but he doesn't have a will. No, intestate. He died intestate. He didn't have a will.
But
So-
if he didn't have a will inside of him when they found it.
There'll be a, then exactly, because that's according to your wishes, that's voluntary, right? But it's involuntary alienation because he didn't have a will, and the property automatically descends to your closest relatives because we don't have this legal document that says this property is supposed to go to this charity. So you can make a deed valid, signed competently by a grantor in front of 2 adult witnesses, but that valid deed needs to be delivered to the grantee accepted by them. You can't do that beyond your passing unless you have a will, but he didn't. Math again, take out your calculators. A retail business rents a space in the mall. The lease calls for rent of $2,000 a month plus 5% of annual gross sales in excess of $400,000. If the annual gross sales are $550,000, what's the total annual rent for the business? Okay, we'll find out. Let's go through this together. 3 basic steps. First step, get your annual base. Now, in real life, you think they're going to wait a whole year to get the sales from you? No. But most likely for exam purposes, they're going to ask you to calculate on an annual basis. So what's the rent per month? Yeah, and how do you get from monthly to annual? Multiply by what? Exactly. So just using the math in your head, 24,000. And we're going to need that for step number 3, but let's focus on step number 2. Calculate the percentage charge on your gross sales. Well, how much sales did you have in the year? 550,000. So we plug that in. But they said if you go over what amount? 400,000? Obviously you went over, right? And they said they want to take a percentage. What percent off of the difference? 5%. So let's go through this together. You can take out your calculator, go ahead and subtract and find out the overage, the additional sales you had within the year over the threshold. You end up with $150,000, right? Take 550, subtract 400, and you get 150,000, correct? And they said, okay, you had $150,000 more in sales for the year. It's because of our location, and we're going to take a percentage. And what percent? So multiply it by 0.05, that's 5% in decimal form, and the additional rent you have to pay because of your sales, $7,500. Are you following so far? And the last step is to what? Does that add it to your base rent for the year, which is 24,000, and you get 31,500. Is that one of your choices? Yeah. Man, there is always something going on outside. Always an ambulance or a fire truck or something. Every single time. I mean, at least when we've been coming here. So it matches up with letter what? It is D as in Delta. Any questions? All right. But we had an agreement. We had an agreement to work on what? Immediately, right? You had the time to do it. That's not the question. Let's go through it together. Question 1. The northwest quarter, the northeast quarter, the southwest quarter. How many acres do you own? How do I know? Look at the answers. They're all in acres, right? First of all, we don't even need the section, the township line, range line. All we need is this information right here. Really, all we need are the fractions. We don't even need the directions. To do the math, all we need to do is start off by putting what in our calculator? Exactly. So you put 640 in your calculator and you divide by the denominators, the bottom number of each fraction. How many times do you divide by 4? Divide by 4, divide by 4, divide by 4. Hit that equal sign, and yes, you get 10 acres. Is that one of our choices? Look how simple that was. If you want to see it in action, very simple. 640 in your calculator. divide by 4, divide by 4, divide by 4, hit that equal sign. Yes, you got 10 acres. Any questions here? You see how simple? This math, you should be ecstatic if this is one of your last 10 math questions on your exam. Should be elated. Now, number 2, it says, which of the following descriptions contains 120 acres? Okay, are you allowed to bring your phones? No. It's a good question. No, you can't bring your phone, so you can make frequent visits to Google. You can't do that for your state exam. They give you a calculator. Most likely it's going to be on screen. But if it's a physical calculator, it's just going to be a very basic calculator. It would be nice if you can bring wearable technology and all this stuff, but you can't bring in even your Apple Watch. You have to leave it in the locker. No Google Glass, no wearable technology. Jacket's got to come off. They give you a locker, and then you retreat. Yeah, they want to stomp out cheating at all costs. Obvious reasons. Yeah. Anyhow. So what's your answer for number 2? It is D, but let's see if it lines up. Okay, let's see why it's D rather. Let's see why. It has to add up to 120 acres. It says northwest quarter of the southern half and the southeast quarter of the southeast quarter. First of all, how many properties do you see here?
2.
How do we know? I want you to think of the word and as a what symbol? As a plus symbol. So if it's 2 separate properties, do we have to do 2 separate calculations? Exactly. So we separate the 2. And what number do we put in our calculator first? 640. And for the first property, we take 640. 640. And we divide by 4, then divide by what? Yep, divide by 4, then divide by 2. And what do you get? 80. And then we do the next thing over here. Take 640, put it in your calculator all over again, divide by what? 4, then divide by 4. Divide by 4 2 times, and you get 40. So now, math is simple, right? What's 80 plus 40? 120 acres. You understand why? All right, so once again, the correct answer is D as in Delta. Any questions? We'll get through it together. All right. Number 3, what'd you guys get?
B.
Yep. Meets refers to distance. Bounds refers to direction. B is in Bravo. Number 4 is C, landing concise symbols and words. Number 5, the answer is in the question. Look what it says. 3 township tiers south. That's T3S. There's only one that has T3S. B is in Bravo. A check measures C, 24 miles on each side. Number 6 is C is in Charlie. 7, when you intersect range lines with township tier lines, you make a township, which is how many miles on each side? 6. 6 by 6, how many square miles is that? 36. We refer to each one of the square miles as a what? What do we call it? As a section. So there's 36 sections in a township. When you're labeling sections in a township, where do you always start? Northeast corner and number in a what type of fashion? Snake-like fashion. Exactly. So when in doubt, draw it out, guys. That's the best way to answer these. Don't try to do it in your head. You can easily get confused. But hopefully that stuck with you when you're doing some of these, including number 8, the vertical strip of land 6 miles wide, beginning at the principal meridian and extending 6 miles east along the length of the principal meridian is called. Correct answer. Well, let me show you how it works. If I can be consistent with our handouts, imagine this dot is Tallahassee. So that means the vertical line going through Tallahassee is called the what? It's called the prime or principal meridian. And if we're moving 6 miles to the east from the principal meridian, where do you end up? How would we describe that? Well, we'll end up at a line. You'll see. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We'll end up at this line. 6 miles away from the principal meridian in what direction? In the eastern direction. And remember, there's vertical lines that are 6 miles apart called what? Range lines. And since this is the first 6 miles away from the principal meridian, it is a range line, but it will be the first, R1, in what direction? To the east. R1E is their answer that matches up with that. It's A as in alpha, so not so hard. Any questions here? They just don't describe it well, I would say. I think it will be more clear when you're taking your state exam as to the description. This one is just, it's tricky. I can get that. Let's move on. If you're located at the following township, T1N, R1E, what's the township directly above that called? Well, look at this. If we can use some logic, if we're already at the first box above the baseline, what's the one above it? Tier 2, one more above, right? So if you're already at 1 to the north, you're one above that is tier 2 to the north. And the range doesn't change. They didn't tell you to go to the west or to the east. Just one above. Which statement is false? Well, it's D, because it's 36 square miles, not just 36 acres. 11, the standard sequence of labeling, legal description, B as in Bravo. 12, northern boundary of section 36, tier 1 to the south, range 1 to the west, describes. So they give you answers, and I can tell you the correct answer is D, but I want to show you. Let me recreate the township that they're describing here. Imagine this dot is Tallahassee. So if I can recreate real quick, let's do this. All right, best way. We're located within this township, but let me show you why. This horizontal line going through Tallahassee is called the what? Baseline. And the vertical line going through Tallahassee is called the what? Prime or principal meridian. We're at the first box to the left or to the west of the principal meridian. That's R1W. And we're at the first box below the what? Baseline. So that's T1S. Isn't that what they're describing here? T1S, R1W. So I just recreated it. But it says we're on the northern boundary of section 36 of this township. So we have to draw out all 36 square miles, all 36 sections. You remember this? Okay. So I'll try my best to recreate. Look like this. I could be more efficient. Hold on. Okay, I know it's not perfect, but just bear with me, okay? A little bit wonky, but it is 6 by 6. Do you see 6 by 6? 36 square miles. And where do you start with labeling sections within a township? Well, north, east corner, upper right-hand corner, and number in a what type of fashion? Snake-like fashion. And then you'll end up with 36 right here. And it says we're on the northern boundary of section number what? 36 of this particular township. So they're describing, if you look up here, I'm coloring it. This is the northern boundary, right? So what answer best describes that? Well, it can't be A because it says 6 miles south of the prime meridian. Last time I checked, the prime meridian is going from north to what? How do you find 6 miles south of a line that's north to south? You're not moving in a perpendicular direction from something. You're just on this vertical line. Where do you start? Don't assume you're starting at Tallahassee. We never mentioned that. So it didn't say you're starting at the baseline and going south of that. We can find that location. It said you're on this, 6 miles south of the prime meridian. Where on the prime meridian? It's top of Florida all the way to the bottom. So that answer is out. We can't choose 35 miles west of the baseline for the same reason. Baseline is going from west to what? How do you find 35 miles west of that line? It's going from west to east already. That the answer is out. Can't be C because it says 25 miles west of the principal meridian. We can find that location because we're moving away from a line that we can identify, right? Prime meridian, we're moving west of that. So in a perpendicular direction from that. So we can find it, but it's not accurate because look, this vertical line going through Tallahassee is called a what? Prime meridian, and we're located right here. Each one of these sections, last time I checked, is 1 mile on each side. So if we're on the northern boundary, we're only within 1 mile of the prime meridian. 25 miles west, I mean, this is 6. I mean, we're going to go off the page. So it's got to be D, but let's see why it's D. It says 5 miles south of the what? Baseline. This is, look, up here. This is the baseline. And we're moving south of that so we can find that location. 1, 2. Each one of these is a mile apart, right? 3, 4, 5. Is that true? Yeah, correct answer is D for that reason. Any questions here? When in doubt, draw it out. That's going to be a theme. Do not try to do this in your head. You can get so confused doing it in your head. They give you a scrap sheet of paper, use it, and draw it out. Just get it out of your mind, put it on paper, and the answer should reveal itself to you. Or at least eliminate the ones that you were thinking could be true. You're like, oh my gosh, when I draw it out, it doesn't make any sense. So I can find my way to the correct answer by putting it on paper. It's okay. We live, we learn. Number 13, what'd you get? Yeah, it's the same concept. They just wrote it out in words. It's the same math. So you put 640 in your calculator, divide by the denominators, and you got your answer. 14, a man owned the northwest quarter of an entire section. He sold half of it. What does he still own? Well, look, the math is simple. We know a section, 1 square mile, is how many acres? And it says he owns a quarter of that. So wouldn't you divide by 4 to find a quarter? But then he sold half. So that means you take that and divide by what? That's all you had to do. And you got your answer, which is, isn't it 80 acres? So correct answer is B as in Bravo. You see how simple with a little bit of logic? B as in Bravo. And 15, what did you guys get? It's B as in Bravo. Any questions here? All right, does it make sense after we went through it? Is it clicking now? That's the whole point. You make your mistakes now. Make your mistakes now while we're in class. And then when you get to your state exam, you're like, okay, I've seen this before. I fell for that before. I'm not going to fall for it again. And that's the whole point. So we're going to be better off. Let's go ahead and get started with our session for today because we're still making good time, if that's all right. And today is going to be units 11 and 12. And these units are really straightforward because look at unit 11. It's all about contracts. And of course, you have to understand the details of contracts that we're going to use for the various circumstances we come across in our business. However, it's not complicated. That's what I can say about it for now. Just bear with me and you'll get the hang of it. It will make sense. So real estate contracts. Remember, on the first day of class, we talked about how important it is for us to understand contracts because this is what buyers and sellers rely on us for. It's one of our areas of knowledge we must have as a real estate licensee. So we're going to begin on page 246 and start on line 2. It's important for you to hear this. Nearly every business transaction is based on a what? Isn't that what a contract is? A contract is an agreement, right? Last time I checked, yes. And that's confirmed for us here. This is the definition of a contract, line 4. It's an agreement between two parties to do or to not do certain things, supported by some sufficient consideration. And it's legal things. You're not doing things illegal. You can't have a contract to do something or not do something illegal, right? That would otherwise violate law. But look on line 7. Under every agreement, contract is a what? On line 7. The rest of this page is basically relevant. The whole page is relevant. I'm going to go through the whole page. It is important for you to hear this. So key to every contract is the promise to do or to not do certain things. Like in a real estate contract, look what it says here. The seller promises to transfer title And the buyer promises to pay the purchase price. Does that make sense? And contract promises are enforceable by law provided the contract meets certain requirements. This is what we're going to discuss within the unit. What are those requirements that you have to comply with? But you have to know some things. That's why we see preparation of contracts. I'm going to read this out to you. It's important for you to hear. The drafting of legal documents, they call them legal instruments as well, for others is considered to be practicing what? Yeah. And unless you're also a lawyer, then you can't prepare legal documents as a real estate licensee. And it said you could lose your license regardless of whether or not you're compensated for doing it. You'll see it right here. It could be disciplined and lose your license. That's practicing law without a law license. And it's the same penalty for practicing real estate without a real estate license. Do you remember? It's a third degree what? Don't you see that, the last sentence? Okay. The next paragraph is relevant as well. Authority. Real estate licensees cannot draft what? Leases. Remember what we discussed in Unit 7. A lease agreement has to meet certain obligations, right? The landlord and the tenant. This is governed under the Florida Residential Landlord and Tenant Act. We talked about the obligations for the landlord, heat and hot water and certain things like that. And then also the tenant, don't be inconsiderate, don't disturb the peace. Do you remember this? And certain other things that we discussed within that unit. I'm not going to review all of them right now. The point is, you can't just draw up whatever you wish. It has to meet these state requirements. So that's why we have this in front of us. It says real estate licensees cannot draw up those lease agreements. However, you can fill in the blanks on residential lease agreements for a lease period that does not exceed what? And has been already prepared by a licensed Florida, yeah. We're talking about attorney, and also pre-approved by the Florida Supreme Court. So you can't just draw up whatever you wish when it comes to a lease here in Florida. It has to meet certain standards. And that's why they want lawyers preparing them, but they leave blanks. Like, so you can fill in dollar amounts and time periods and so forth and certain conditions outside of the requirements that we know to be true for the landlord tenant. All right, I keep on telling you things that you can't prepare, draft, or be involved in as a real estate licensee. Now let's talk about the types of real estate contracts you can prepare and be involved in. And it's what's on this list. Let's go through this list together. You see a listing agreement, pretty straightforward. This is an employment contract with the seller to list their property. Does that make sense? A buyer's agreement. This is an employment contract with the buyer to help them purchase. Does that make sense? A sale and purchase agreement. This is a contract naturally between a seller and buyer for purchase and sale of real property. And we're going to discuss that. And then we'll also come back to an option contract, which I don't want to reveal just yet. I want to talk about this in a moment. You might have heard of this before, but I will explain it if you haven't on a later page. Go to page 247. Highlight this. You need to know this class exam question. We see essential elements of a what? Yeah. Essential elements of a contract. What are the essentials of a valid? You see, valid contract. Let's go through each one. We have to know these components. Remember, they're essential. So the first, look in parentheses. This simplifies it. You're dealing with what type of parties? We know what competent means, right? Of sound mind and of legal what? Legal age. That's the first requirement. Next, something's offered within the agreement accepted by another. We refer to this as mutual assent. I mentioned this previously, or a meeting of the what? Minds. An agreement between two parties to do or to not do certain things, right? Has to be something legal you're doing within the agreement. That's common sense though, right? This is why drug dealers don't have contracts between one another. If a drug deal goes bad, right? they're not going to take them to court. You understand? You can handle it right there on the spot. Hey, Judge, I told him we're bringing 10 kilos by Friday, but he never. No, that's a bad Scarface impression. But you get it, right? You're not going to take them to court because you're doing something illegal. And consideration. So what is this consideration? We saw it in a previous unit. Let's see it once again and how it relates to contracts of any type being valid. Remember, the promise to do or to not do certain things between those two parties could be supported by one of two types of consideration. Did you exchange that promise for valuable consideration? What does that mean, exchange it for valuable consideration? It means in exchange for, yes, cash or something measured in terms of money, something of value, right? Or did you exchange that promise for good consideration, which is keywords, love and what? Yeah. So it's love and affection. So if you have an agreement to give property to your child, what type of consideration do you think that's going to be supported? Yeah, most likely, unless you're my family. Anyhow, next we see statute of frauds. This is important. Obviously, you're going to be tested in a number of ways. Yeah, 3 separate ways on the same information. So is it important? Yes. So just a moment ago, we said for contracts of any type to be valid, it has to have the 4 essential elements. Do you remember the 4? Let me repeat. Competent parties, offer and acceptance, legal purpose, consideration. But for real estate sale contracts, we have to add 1 additional element. And not just real estate sale contracts. So you'll see right here, it says contracts transferring what's interest? Ownership rights and real property from one individual or a company to another, and contracts that are not to be completed within 1 year of the date created. Must be, what's the key on line 18? Must be what? In writing and to be enforceable, okay? What does that mean, Michael? Enforceable? It means you can take them to court based off of not complying with the terms. So it means it's recognized in the court of law. It has to be in writing and signed to be able to take it to court. So what contracts fall under this requirement and have to be in writing and signed to be enforceable if something goes wrong, and try to hold them accountable for their obligations in the agreement? Purchase and sale. Isn't that an agreement that transfers ownership rights? That's the stipulation. I'm going to sell you this property in exchange. I'm going to convey the deed. Option contracts, we'll come back to this. Deeds and mortgages, of course. And check this out. Lease, listing, and buyer agreements for a term of longer than what? That's what you see here. Not to be completed within 1 year. Longer than 1 year. Must be, what's the key? I'm repeating this again on line 18. Must be what? To be? Yes, enforceable in the court of law. Take them to court, enforce it in front of a judge to hold them accountable for their obligations. I'll come back to this, but let's continue on to statute of what? Limitations. Maybe you've heard of this before. Has anybody heard of statute of limitations? It's the time limit to hold somebody legally accountable for not performing their obligations in the agreement. So if the contract is in writing, within how many years do you have to take them to court? 5 years. If it's a verbal agreement, within 4 years. But you might be thinking, okay, well, wait a second, Michael. I thought you said it has to be in writing and signed to be enforceable. But look at what we have on this list. Lease, listing, buyer agreements for a term of longer than what? 1 year must be in writing and signed to be enforceable. So what if, just hypothetically, so you can make the connection, what if you have a lease that's 6 months? Then it doesn't have to meet this requirement. It doesn't have to be in writing and signed to hold somebody legally accountable, take them to court, and enforce their obligations. Does that make sense? It could be verbal, but you can imagine how difficult it is to enforce something that's verbal between two parties. It's oral, right? The legal description of this is all hearsay. You've heard of hearsay? It's he say, she say. You've heard of that before, right? A judge wants to see some agreed upon terms, something in writing that they can easily enforce. That's just the way it is. But go to the next page, page 249, elements of not just a valid, but also enforceable real estate sale contract. You might be tested on this. I can almost guarantee it for exam purposes. And to help you remember these elements of a valid and enforceable real estate sale contract, very prevalent in our business, think of the acronym COLIC. Okay, so those of you who have kids, anybody have kids? You know what colic is, right? A baby is irritable because it has gases and usually cries a lot as a result of this. Now, it's just a way to help us remember, but you recognize 4 of these already to just make the contract valid, right? Competent parties offer an acceptance, legal purpose, and consideration just to make the contract what? Valid. And that's what's in this description, right? A valid and what? Look what it says on this title. Valid and enforceable. So what does it take to make a real estate sale contract enforceable? We added one additional element, right? And it's what? In writing, yes, and signed. We call that the statute of frauds requirement, right? You see statute of frauds? So the fact that you have a valid contract is okay, but if you want to enforce in the court of law, if it's a purchase and sale agreement for real property, it has to be in writing and signed. It has to meet the statute of frauds requirement. Remember that, drill that in, statute of frauds requirement. Any questions here? All right, we're still making good time. Let's continue on. I want us to go to this list, figure 11.1 at the bottom, contracts in general, just so we have a better idea of what it's referring to here. Let's go through each item on this list. What is a valid contract? Well, it means it contains all of the required essentials. Do you remember the 4? Competent parties, offer an acceptance, legal purpose, and consideration. It's void, a contract is void, if it's missing one or more of those elements. So one of those elements is that it has to be something legal you're doing within the agreement. So what if the contract is for something illegal? It violates law. And the contract is void. It basically means the contract does not exist. Voidable is interesting. It means one of the parties in the agreement can void at any time. One of the parties does not have to perform their obligations. It's voidable for that reason. And I'll come back to that. I'll give you some examples. Enforceable, very simple. We know it's recognized in the court of law. Unenforceable means good luck. You can't enforce it in front of the court of law or in front of a judge and hold them legally accountable. Let's continue on. Go to page 250. And what you'll see starting on line 4 is different sets of contracts. Like the first set is formal versus what? Yep. Then bilateral, unilateral. By the way, you'll be tested on one of these. Class exam question, lock that in. Okay. Go to page 251, and you'll see another item that you should highlight. Going to be tested on it. But I'm going to come back to this. I just want you to make the highlight for now. Something suspicious is going on over here with these mail guys. I've never seen a powwow of like mailmen like exchanging mail between trucks. Is very interesting. Like these are the Amazon shipments that, you know. This symbol means it's a Mac product, you know. So stuff goes missing. All right, this is where I wanted to get to a figure 11.2, and let's break down these different sets of contracts. And we have enough time to go through this. Let's go through the first set of contracts: formal versus what? Very simple. Formal means a contract is in what? Thank you. That means informal means it's not in what? What's another name for a contract that's not in writing? Oral, parole. This is French. Yes. Which means what? It means in words, right? Or verbal, all the same thing that is not in writing. Does that make sense? Okay. Bilateral and unilateral. This is where you got to pay attention. What's the prefix of the word bilateral? It's bi, which means what? It means both. And you'll even see that here, I think, right? Yeah, both. The easiest way to help you remember, think of a bicycle. Think of a bicycle. So we say it quickly. We say bicycle, but it's actually a bicycle, which requires the use of both wheels to operate. So that will help you remember. So a bilateral contract is where both parties are obligated to perform as a contract states. Both parties obligated. Do you see that? Versus what? What's the prefix? Uni. Or what does uni mean? Yeah, unison, unicycle, right? Requires the use of one wheel to operate. This will help you remember. One party is obligated to perform as a contract state. Add this to the end of it so it makes more sense. Let me stretch this out. While the other party may void. They can void at any time. And that's why we also refer to unilateral contracts as being voidable. I told you we would come back to it. Here it is. Unilateral contracts are voidable contracts because one of the parties can void at any time. So you're probably wondering, okay, Michael, what is an example of that? Let me give you 3 examples that you might be tested on. And I'll explain each. The first is conveying. No. The first one is a brokerage incentive. A brokerage incentive. Let me create an example so you can better understand what I just got you guys to write down. I'm your broker. You're all my associates. I decide to add an incentive for your sales performance in a month. I tell you, to incentivize you guys, I want you to hit a certain volume of sales. And if you do, then I'm going to give you a bonus, whatever it is. I'll give you, I don't know, free Disney tickets. Doesn't matter. The point is, what I'm describing to you is a unilateral contract. Why? Even if I just mention it verbally, it's still a unilateral contract.
Yeah.
Who's the party that must perform? The broker or the associate? It's actually the broker. The broker must perform. Because the associate, they don't need to perform. It just means they won't get the what? They won't get the bonus. But if they do perform, then does the broker need to give the bonus? That's why one party is obligated, the other party is not. And that's one example of a unilateral contract. Do you follow? Another example of a unilateral contract is conveying property to a minor. Are you allowed to convey property to a minor?
Oh, you can.
Yeah, because minors do not have to be what? To receive competent, to receive ownership rights and real property. So you can have an agreement to convey property to a minor, but it's a unilateral agreement. Why? Who must perform, the adult or the minor? The adult, of course. The minor can get out at any point if they wish to do so. And that's why it's voidable. Any questions about this? So the adult must perform. The minor does not have to perform. They can get out if they choose. It's unilateral, which are also known as being voidable. And the last example of this, which I mentioned and we would come back to, is an option contract. I'm pretty sure that most of us have heard what an option contract is. You probably just need to hear it mentioned in a different way. Have you ever heard of a rent with the option to buy? That's an option contract. So you know what an option contract is. They might also describe it as a lease option. Have you heard of that? Because it's structured as a what? As a lease. You pay an upfront amount, they call it an option fee, that goes towards the purchase price like a deposit. You enter into a lease, maybe it's 12 months, and at the end of the lease, you have the option to move forward with purchase or not. If you decide not to move forward, then you just forfeit your option fee, whatever was negotiated as the option fee. If you decide you want to purchase, does the owner have to sell it to you? Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. That's the option. So do you see how one party must perform, the other party can get out if they choose?
Yeah.
The property owner has to sell it, but the person that has the option, that's this tenant slash potential buyer, they don't have to buy at the end. They can walk away.
Right.
Now, very simple next. If you want something to be included with purchase and sale of real estate, you should always express or put it in what? Put it in words. Put it in the agreement so that there's no confusion between all parties involved. But even if it's not in writing, could you still try to fight for things that are not in writing? You remember we talked about this in a previous unit? We talked about in unit 8 the difference between personal property and fixtures. And you remember Irma or Irma? We have different reasons why the buyer might try to fight for things that they thought should have been included with the property, but it wasn't necessarily in writing. Is it going to cause damage? Is it easily replaceable? Do you remember those things? So that's what we're describing here. It's by actions and not necessarily in words, in writing, or through conduct. It's like when you go to a restaurant, you sit down, you order a meal. You don't sign a contract, a legally binding contract between you and the owner of the restaurant as soon as you sit down and order your meal. But it's implied at the end of your meal, upon your enjoyment, that you pay your flipping what? You pay your bill, right? And if you try to eat and leave without paying, could they prosecute you even though it's not in writing? Yes. All right. If a contract has not been completed, this is how we describe it. We describe it as being executory. If a contract has yet to be completed, obligations have not been performed yet, it's executory. Versus a contract that has been completed, that's known as being what? And that makes sense. That's easy to remember, right? You execute. This term is also used to describe a contract that has been completely filled out and signed by all concerning parties. Have you ever heard of a real estate agent saying, oh, we have a fully executed contract for purchase and sale of real estate? Both buyer and seller, they signed. So now we're under contract. So it could be used to describe that as well. Any questions here? All right, we're making good time. Let me see if there's something I want to mention to you before we take our break. Come on, catch up. My computer's running slow. Uh-oh.
Yeah, it's running out of battery apparently. Uh-oh.
Did I put my charger? That's crazy. Did I leave my charger? I think I did. I think I left it at the Rotary meeting. Sheesh. Huh? No, computer. I'll get to this in a second. Let's take a break because now I got to figure it out. Be back at 6:05. 6:05. Stretch out, grab a snack, do what you got to do. Be ready to rock and roll. See you guys in just a second.
Yeah, still on.
Nice. How do you feel? Are you still hosting or was it just over the weekend? Do that. Hello, hello. Testing, testing. Yeah, you can hear me, but I don't want to use that mic. I want to use this one. Hello, hello. Test, test, test. Test, test, test. Good? Okay. Cool. We're back. A reset. All right, let's jump right back into our session. We're on page 252. Line 12, we see contract negotiation. But at the end of line 13, highlight this. In the normal sequence of forming an agreement, one party begins by making a what? An offer. The person giving the offer is called the offer, and the person receiving is the offer. Yes, another set of ors and es that we have to accommodate. Let's move a little bit further down, and what we're going to see specifically on line 34 is an offer is what? Terminated by any of the following reasons. You're going to be tested on one specifically, class exam question, but we're going to go through all the various ways to terminate the agreement. Terminate an offer, essentially. To help save us some time and stay on track here, you see in this box it says ways an offer is what? Once again, termination is not necessarily something negative. Termination real estate means to end, not necessarily to cancel or to break. So these are the various ways an offer is ended in the negotiation process between two parties. Not in any particular order. It's just placed in this order to help you remember forming this acronym. W stands for what? Yeah, before the offeree has a chance to consider your offer, the person who gave the offeror can withdraw. That's one way an offer might be what? Terminated. I must have been insane to offer you $1 million for your house. Something like that. Unfortunately, insanity is one way to terminate, but you have to somehow prove insanity. Good luck. Lapse of time. The time has expired for the offer. That's going to be detailed in your agreement in the contract. It's actually on the first page of a typical sale contract we use here in Florida. So obviously the first page is going to have your offer, how much you're willing to pay for the property, but how long you're giving the offeree a chance to consider your offer. And imagine if you give them the next business day to consider your offer because you think your offer is very attractive and nothing happens with the offer 24 hours later. What happens with the offer? It's what? It's terminated. So that's what we're describing. The first D is for death. Obviously, you can't force somebody to complete their offer from beyond the grave. Counter offer is what you're tested on for your class exam, but you might see it on your state exam as well. Let me explain this with an example. You make an offer on my property. Maybe I don't like it. I think your offer is not as attractive as I think it could be. So I submit a what right back to you? A counter offer. But what happens to your previous offer? Terminated. Exactly. That's what we're describing. Counter offers terminate the previous offer. We can't go backwards. So imagine if I submit a counter offer, but now you're turned off and don't want to buy my property. Can I say, well, wait, no. I looked at your previous offer and I think it's fair. I'm going to just sign the previous offer. It doesn't exist because as soon as I submitted my counter offer, it terminated the previous. The only way to move forward is for one or both parties to submit an entirely new what? Offer. And A stands for what? Acceptance is going to terminate because now we're no longer negotiating. It's no longer offeror and offeree. We agree to the terms of the contract, the sale contract. Rejection. I don't have to accept. I could just say no. That's one way an offer might be terminated. But here's the thing. In our world, in real estate, if you make an offer on behalf of a buyer that you're working with and the seller or the listing agent, representing the seller, sends you a rejection, you need to find out what's going on. Usually it's one of two things. Either they accepted somebody else's offer because it was more attractive, but even then, shouldn't they inform you and at least give your buyers a fighting chance to maybe submit their highest and best? Because maybe they actually really wanted the property and they were willing to come up.
But the agent wouldn't know that if they just send you a rejection or you insulted them with your first offer. And I've insulted a lot of people in this business. It's just the nature of the game. So don't be afraid to submit offers that you think might get rejected, but figure out what's going on behind the rejection. Don't stop at the rejection. Dig a little bit deeper because it could bring up conversation which actually gives your buyer a fighting chance. And destruction of the property. If you submit an offer on a property, but it's wiped out by Hurricane Helene Milton or whatever, then it would terminate your offer. Any questions here? Now let's talk about the various ways to terminate a what? A contract. Similar to the ways that we talked about in Unit 4 to terminate a relationship, but anyhow. State exam might ask you what's the best way to terminate. Your answer is the first bullet point. Starts with a P, it's what? Yeah, performance means everybody accomplished their goals, right? Everybody got what they wanted. Buyer said they would buy, they bought it. Seller said they would sell, they sold it. We got paid our commission. We all walk away what? Happy is the best way to end things. Performance. Mutual rescission. Both parties want to cancel. That's what it means. You know what rescission means, right? To rescind, to cancel. Impossibility of performance. We'll look up here. Destruction or what will terminate? Or death, if you see what I'm highlighting. Destruction or death. Lapse of time. If we're talking about a contract for purchase and sale of real estate, there's a closing date that's negotiated, right? When is the closing date going to be? When are we going to solidify this deal and transfer title to real property? What if it exceeds the closing date and both parties can't agree to an extension? Maybe because the buyer needs more what? Time to close, to get their funds in order and so forth. Lapse of time. If it exceeds the closing date, that would terminate if the seller is not willing to agree to an extension. But now one party could be in what? And this is probably the worst way to terminate. The word breach means the breaking of a promise. It's the breaking of a promise. And remember, a key to every contract is the what? The promise. Once again, the promise to do or to not do certain things. So if you break that promise, we call it breach, but how do you remedy? How do you resolve somebody breaking their promise in an agreement? Let's discuss that because there's several ways to accomplish this. You'll go to page 255 and let's focus on the shaded box, which summarizes what I just skipped over. Let's go through each one, not in any particular order, not like, okay, number one is the best one, but let's go through each one so we better understand the solutions, the remedies if somebody breaks their promise. One way to resolve is to take them to what? Yeah. And look up here. The judge will force them to perform specific obligations, specific performance. For instance, I've seen circumstances where the seller, they get cold feet and they realize, I got too many memories in this house. I didn't know it was going to sell this quick. Now I have to be a buyer again in this market with higher interest rates. I don't want to sell my house. I'm not going to sign. Well, you have a contract that says you have to sell your property by this closing date. And the buyer was ready, willing, able to purchase. So one solution, the buyer takes the seller to court. And a judge forces the seller to convey title, to sell the property. I've seen that circumstance. So that's one example. Another solution, if somebody breaches, is for the injured party to claim liquidated damages. Injured party claiming liquidated damages, what does that mean? It means they're claiming the EMD. What's the EMD, guys? There you go. So when would that situation occur? Very simple. If the buyer by the closing date is not ready, willing, and able to purchase, and the seller doesn't want to give them more time, the buyer is in breach. And the solution is for the seller to keep the what? Earnest money deposit. That means they're claiming what type of damages? Starts with an L. That's how you're going to be tested on your exam. So be careful with that. Not be careful, but understand what's associated with it. Rescission means the injured party just wants to do what? Rescind, to cancel, yes. That could be a solution. Hey, listen, you broke your promise. Good. I didn't want to be under contract with you anyway. So this is my opportunity to get out. And lastly, the injured party tries to claim what type of damages? Yes. And now you encounter two types of damages. You see liquidated damages and compensatory. What's the basic difference between the two, and how might you be tested on it? Very simple. If the injured party tries to claim the earnest money deposit only, what do we call that? It starts with L? Yeah. So what if the injured party tries to claim something beyond, something more than the deposit because the party breached? That's compensatory. So that's how you can figure out the difference for your exam. If they say injured party claims the deposit only, what is that describing? Liquidated. Anything over the deposit, beyond it, compensatory. Like if the injured party, imagine the buyer was not ready, willing, or able to purchase by the scheduled closing date, and the seller has had enough. With all of the requests and burdens that they're trying to put on them, you told me I had to move out by the closing date, but not just that, get it professionally cleaned. And this type of cleaning and having it sanitized and all of this stuff cost me $1,000. Plus I have to pay for moving expenses. Plus I have to find a place to rent temporarily until I can find a new house, all of this. So I'm going to go after you legally for those additional damages for wasting my time. That will be compensatory. Does that make sense? Assignment of contract is self-explanatory. You're assigning your rights and obligations under the agreement to another party. Somebody else is taking your position. This is what wholesalers are utilizing. Have you heard of wholesalers? Okay, so what a wholesaler does, you're going to encounter this in the business because it's very prevalent. Wholesaler will find a seller that's willing to sell their property for way below market value, what it's actually worth. And they lock it under contract to take the position as a buyer, as if they're going to purchase it. So they have a contract with the seller. Hey, I'm going to buy your property. But what they do is they make the contract assignable. They have the right to assign it to another investor who's willing to pay a little bit more, $5,000, $10,000 more than what they were under contract for purchasing. So they would make money off the difference. So wholesalers just are out there looking for opportunities to find property that's valued more than what the seller is willing to sell it for. And then just sign it over. I've taken advantage of these. I've worked with wholesalers and they brought me deals, and I'm working on 2 deals right now that wholesalers brought to me. You don't have to be licensed to do it. That's going to change. That is going to change. And then it's going to put wholesaling. Yeah. Yeah. Is that in your algorithm? You see videos about it all the time? Yeah. They usually just want you to buy into a system, but anyhow, you get some good information here and there and you can piece things together, but you can get that same information online. Watching YouTube videos, watching short form videos, you can piece together what the secret sauce is. But if you just go to one seminar, you'll get a little bit. And then they'll leave out the real secret sauce because unless you buy into the system. Or you want to unlock our purchasing power, right? But for us to back you, then you buy into the system. Anyhow. So assignment is exactly what we described, but novation is a document that all parties have to sign to complete assignment. Let me explain that. Let me repeat that actually. Novation agreement is a document that all parties must sign to solidify the assignment of contract. And you'll see it right here. It's used to substitute a new party for the what? The original party. The effect is to discharge the original party from the obligation in the agreement. You'll see here. Any questions? Contracts? Yes.
So, in that wholesaling situation, if they are unable to assign the contract, they are liable to complete the contract.
Yeah, but usually the way that they structure it is to give them an opportunity to get out without any penalty. Or they say, hey, listen, I'm going to lock it in for this purchase price, but their agreement is not to put any deposit down. It's basically like a letter of intent. I don't like that side of the business. I don't like the tactics that they use. And I don't like the fact that they're not licensed, because when they're speaking with somebody who is well versed on contract law, real estate procedures and so forth, we're not speaking the same language. And then it's really hard to get through to them because, oh, I've been doing this way. Yeah, but you've been doing it illegally or incorrectly for all of this time. Doesn't make it right. So you have to re-educate some of these individuals, and it's unfortunate. So I do believe that's going to change. More regulation is going to happen. Watch. I mean, if I have anything to say about it. And it's not like I want to take away opportunities from individuals, but the regulation is in place for a reason. It's to protect parties involved. And there's a lot of unethical activities in the wholesaling world. I don't know if you've noticed or have seen anything about it, but
That's why that kind of, like, man, there's gotta be illegal and legal things you guys are doing here. Like, it sounds too good to be true.
yeah. Well, you paint a picture. There's opportunities to make good money, and there's ways to do it correctly, but a lot of them are just in this gray area. And I just don't like to do that type of business. Now, contracts important to real estate. Obviously, the most important agreement is the what? Yeah, this is an employment contract with the seller to list their property, right? Okay. There's features of a listing agreement that you should be aware of. Highlight these to start off with. A listing agreement has to have a definite what? Look what it says here. Furthermore, the listing may not include an automatic what? Renewal clause. You could be fined by the beeper if you try to put an automatic renewal clause. If it ends, you have to get them to sign a completely new agreement. The rest is self-explanatory. Look what it says. Description of the property, listing price terms, broker's compensation, signatures. Come on. But there's different types of listings that you might not be aware of that could be used when representing a seller. The first one, you probably won't like this one. You're going to be tested on it, obviously. Starts with an O. It's what? It means it's open to any brokerage. There's no exclusivity with one particular brokerage company to list the property and look for a buyer. Whoever finds a buyer first, however, earns the what? But we don't like that. We want exclusivity, right? So that's why we wouldn't choose that one. We would choose an exclusive agreement. Now, the next is an exclusive agreement, but with a unique feature. It says exclusive agency listing, but look on line 5. The seller still reserves the right to sell the what? Without paying a what? Interesting. So yes, you're the only brokerage that can list and look for a buyer, market the property and blast it throughout the internet. But the seller also has the right to do the same. And if they find a buyer before you, they do not owe you a commission. I've used this on a couple of circumstances because you come across some hard-headed individuals that just refuse to sign anything with you. You're like, hey, listen, if I'm going to list it in the MLS, the Realtors Association and the code of ethics that you buy into with that membership says you have to have a signed listing contract to put it in the MLS. So you say, hey, listen, we have to have a signed agreement. Otherwise, they can't advertise it for you. And maybe they don't like that. But then on top of it, they say, well, I'm not going to sign an exclusive agreement with you. Well, I'm going to do my job. All right. Now we can negotiate the terms of service, like how long I'm going to list it for. I'll work with you on that. You got to give me a reasonable amount of time to market the property, look for a buyer, and I'll pull up statistics and find out the ideal time. But I need an exclusive agreement. At least I'll push for it. And the brokerage company you work for is going to tell you to push for that as well. Because why would you want to leave the door open for some other brokerage to take your client and earn commissions when you should be in the place for that? What, you're just going to put forth all this effort for no reason? Anyhow, but to give them this illusion of control, I'll use the exclusive agency agreement. Why? Because I'll say, hey, listen, I'll compromise. Okay, I'll compromise if you compromise. You're going to give us exclusive representation to list your property, but I'll still give you the opportunity to look for a buyer on your own, because I think that's what you're getting at. You feel like if I don't do a good job, then you could do a better job and you can find a buyer before me. I encourage you to do so. That's how you would structure it with this type of listing contract. And you give them this illusion that they're going to do a better job than you, but I can guarantee 99.999% of the time, you're going to find a buyer before them because you have tools that the public doesn't have access to, right? You got the MLS that blasts it throughout the entire internet and all these things at your fingertips, technology. They're just going to put a sign in the front yard. They're going to put an ad in a local newspaper or post it on social media. How effective is that really going to be? But the one that you want to fight for, and your brokerage will tell you to utilize this, it says, look, it gives the broker the greatest degree of what? Protection. It's the exclusive right to sell listing. The name gives it away. You have the exclusive right to sell. So what does that actually mean? Highlight this. That's on line 19. The broker, therefore, is assured a what? Regardless of who sells the what? Property. So even if they find a buyer before you, by the way, your job does not end when a buyer is found. So if they find a buyer, congratulations, but you're still working. You're still coordinating between all parties to get it to the closing. And you should be compensated as such. And this would lock you in for that. The net listing, however, you'll be tested on this, is illegal in most states. It's illegal in most states, but look on line 29, if I can bounce around real quick. Net listings in Florida are what? Yeah, because Florida doesn't care. They say, go out and sell something. But the reason why this is illegal in a lot of other states is because it leaves too much room for unethical behavior on the licensee's part. So let me explain how it's structured and you'll see why I'm saying that. So you have an agreement to list the seller's property for a certain amount, $300,000. But the stipulation is if you can find a buyer willing to pay more than $300,000, you keep whatever the difference is. So you can imagine that leaves the door open for maybe not presenting certain offers because you're waiting for the best offer to come in where you can make a higher bonus and all these things. But what's your duty in all circumstances? What are we discussing Unit 4? Your duty is to present all offers, counter offers in a timely manner, explaining the details of each to make an informed decision. You don't get to be picky and say, oh, well, this person is willing to pay $295, but we have an agreement. If I can sell it over $300, I think I can find that. So I'm not going to present that one. I'm going to wait till I get $315, $320, $325. So that's when it becomes unethical, illegal, and so forth. That's why I just don't like this. And even if the seller presents this idea to you, and I've had sellers present this to me in the past. I work with friends and family and so forth. They say, hey, listen, I need to get at least $500,000 for this property. If you can sell it for more, go for it. And you can keep the rest. I need at least $500,000. I would still use the exclusive right to sell listing. I wouldn't use this one. Even though what they're asking for is the net listing. And it's their idea, right? So you're thinking, oh, it's their idea. It shouldn't be bad. They know what they were getting into. But then when you go to the closing, on the closing documents, the closing paperwork, you can see all the amounts are itemized. All the expenses are itemized, including the commission, including a bonus. So they say, okay, you made an extra 25 grand on top of the percentage you make off of the entire purchase price. They're thinking, gosh, why did I agree to this? We should have just done a standard agreement. But they probably knew what they were doing. They probably knew my property was worth more and then just went along with it because they wanted to pocket more of my cash. So even though it was their idea, you think they're going to be happy that they're losing out on $25 extra $1,000? They're not going to be happy with this. They're not going to refer anybody to you, and it just doesn't lead to a good reputation. Stay away from it. That's my advice, my personal advice. Stay away. Go to page 258, and under brokers compensation, look what it says. The brokerage compensation is specified in the what? It could be a commission or a fee. We already know this. But what's important? Look, On line 34, we see it again. The amount of compensation to be paid is always what? Between all parties involved. Any questions here?
This is most updated language, right, based off of the change, we're talking about changes in commission and all that.
Yeah, I mean, they've added a couple more things, but it doesn't conflict with what we see here. So, when do you get paid your commission? At the what? At the closing? Okay. So the question I have for you is it possible for you to charge your commission up front before you complete the service? It is possible. It is possible. If you structure the agreement as specifically to find a purchaser, the name gives it away. You are hired to find a buyer. As soon as they sign the agreement, at that point, you earn your commission, whatever is negotiated. But that's not typical. This is not common. Exactly. What's common, it's kind of like a marketing agreement, right? But what's common is you get paid at the closing. And that's in the effect of a sale, has to go through closing before you earn your commission. You'll see it right here. At the closing, it's the last sentence. So that's most common. And I get this question from time to time. Well, when you close and all parties sign, do you get your commission that day, or do you have to wait several weeks before you get paid and so forth, and wait for your broker to give you your split? You get paid at the closing table. And a lot of the time it's a check. However, you can arrange with the title company or the attorney to wire you your portion of commission, which you're entitled to. And I think that's efficient. And I like that because that's straight in your bank account immediately. You don't have to wait an extra day for it to process the check. Well, yes. Yeah. But your broker, maybe I should be a little bit more clear. I apologize for that. Your broker would coordinate with the title company to make that arrangement. So the broker, and that's the paragraph we see here in front of us, the next paragraph. So the broker would provide specific instructions to the title company or attorney to have your share of commission ready for you on the closing table. Rather than the broker cutting you a separate check, like all the commission going to the broker first, and then the broker says, well, you get 80%, so here's your check for 80%. That's not efficient enough, right? I don't want to wait an extra, for the broker to get around to it. So it's very simple if you get the broker to cooperate, and they should. And you'll see it here. Prepare a check payable to the associate of their share of commission. Yes. Right here. It's in this paragraph. It's what I described to you. Specific written instructions regarding the specific amount of commission the associate is to be paid in the purchase agreement, particular transaction. Now, you might work for a brokerage company that offers 100% commission to their agents. You might have seen these advertisements. Who submitted their fingerprints, by the way?
I haven't done that yet.
Okay.
Wait, to ask you if I needed to do it again, because I already had.
Yes. Yes. Well, if you're talking about for cosmetology,
Yeah.
it doesn't, that's for that license. You need to submit fingerprints for a real estate licensure. So I would say, what are you waiting for? Don't waste any more time. This is the week to get it done, because by the end of class, you want to move on to the next step. You don't want to wait for that to process. So go ahead, pay the fee, schedule the time to get your fingerprints done at a convenient location nearest you, and then 24 hours later, submit the application. myfloridalicense.com. You have that handout that makes it simple for you guys. So yes, those of you online taking class, what are the typical commission splits? I mean, it's a good question. If I can get Ryan to come back and tell you a little bit more about his brokerage, then he'll tell you it's tiered. So he'll start you off at a certain split based on you being new to the business. And then as you prove yourself, he'll increase your split. Brokerage companies do that. For my agents, I start, if I was to hire somebody, I would start, why can't I close this? Maybe this is why. Oh, okay, there we go. I would start my agents at 80-20. And I just want to make my life simplistic. So if I do a clean 80-20, then, it's just simple to keep track of. And if I provide a lead, then it changes the split to 50-50. Or if you're a referral agent that I hire and you refer business to the company and we're doing the work, you're just referring, then it would be 80-20 in the other direction. Give you 20 and we keep 80. So it's simple stuff, but some brokerage companies offer 100% commission and you're like, how is this company still in business if they're giving their agents 100%? It's because they make money off of just having you active with their brokerage, because every month it's like a subscription model. They're going to charge you a certain amount every single month, $100, $200, just to have your license active with them. And it doesn't matter if you do a deal or not, they're still going to make $100, $200 a month off of all of their agents. It could be useful if you're an agent that has already proven yourself, you have a pipeline of business, and you're just looking for the highest split. It's interesting. You guys scared? Well, I mean, it is almost Halloween. It's a ghost of Christmas past. Now let me see what's going on. Hello? Oh, okay. Hey, you're scaring everybody in class. Ghost of Christmas past. Chains jangling. Probably picking up a for sale sign or something. Late nights is a real estate professional. Okay. So we understand that if you can prove that you're the cause for the sale, then you're entitled to a commission, even beyond your agreement. So imagine your listing agreement has ended, but you can prove that when they sold the property later on, the reason why they were able to sell it later on is because of your efforts. You might still be entitled to a commission. I'll give you an example of this, but we call it procuring cause. Broker must have started the chain of events that resulted in a sale. So let's just say you had a listing contract with a seller for, let's just say, 6 months. You were not able to find a buyer in 6 months. And the seller did not want to renew the listing contract with you. But the seller went back to one of the buyers that you introduced to that property and tried to work out a deal without you being involved. Could you still be entitled to a commission? Yeah, because the reason why that buyer even knows your property is available is because I listed it. I was the procuring cause. I was the cause that the property got sold. So that's how you describe it. And yes, you can fight for it legally under this description. You could fight for commission under procuring cause, take legal action, or threat suit because of your right to do so.
Take more of a way of how an agent would know about it.
Well, it's kind of like when you break up with somebody and you kind of,
And word of mouth. I don't know. Doggo? But you know.
and you still have mutual friends that are friends with them on social media.
Because if I was the buyer and the seller, I wouldn't have anything to do with it.
Well, here's the thing. I'll just say this. If you list a property and you weren't able to sell it, you're going to keep tabs on that property. And you can see if that property is relisted, what brokerage company was relisted with, and you can see if that property sold as well. That's in public records. It's on, I showed you pulling up a deed, right, for a property. You can see when a property sold, how much it sold for, and everything. And you're like, man, they sold it for that. I told them to drop the price down to that amount and it would sell. And now they list it with this person, like, that sort of thing. Page 261. The following information appears on a typical purchase and sale agreement. Without even looking at this list on page 261, you could probably tell me everything that appears on a purchase and sale contract. Names, legal description of the property that's being transferred, consideration, purchase price, signatures, financing terms. Come on. Any questions about that? Okay. But something interesting that we described in a previous unit, spouse's signatures. Do you remember we described homesteading and how that changes the rights for each spouse when conveying or selling the property? Okay. So you can't just sell the primary residence of your spouse from under their nose, even if their name is not on the deed. Because it's been homesteaded, that's primary, they have certain rights, and both parties must sign the contract, the agreement for purchase and sale of real estate, to list the property with a brokerage company, put on the market. All of those agreements must be signed by both parties if it's involving the primary residence, the homestead. Check this out on line 39. Let me read this out to you first. A broker does not have the authority or power to sign a contract for the buyer or seller, or to bind a buyer or seller to the contract unless the power to do so is specifically granted. What document gives them the authority to do that? Yep. Do you remember this? And the person who you allow to represent you is called an attorney in what? On line 43, yes. Did you know there's two different type of power of attorney documents? POA documents. You'll see it on the next page. Line 1, the first one's called the what? This one's scary because look up here. It says general power allows the attorney, in fact, to handle all legal matters on another person's behalf. You're pretty much giving them legal permission to be you. That's a scary thought. Giving somebody that level of authority, right? And then the special on the next sentence limits the attorney, in fact, to one specific matter, legal matter on your behalf, and that's it. Like just signing an agreement on your behalf, and that's it. If you want to use a POA document for a real estate transaction, it has to be not only notarized, witness, stamp, signed, sealed by a notary public, but also recorded in a public records. You can't just have it written up and they get it notarized at their bank and they just hold on to it. It has to be recorded for real estate. Other circumstance, when you might use a POA document, you might not have to record it. But for real estate, you do. All right, let's talk about this on page 262 at the bottom. Line 35. Do you see as is provision? Okay. In unit 4, we talked about disclosing material defects, something that the buyer cannot see for themselves. If you have knowledge of it, you have to disclose. Do you remember that? It's your obligation to do so. It doesn't matter how small, like the loose tile under the rug. That was the question. Okay. Even if you're selling the property as is. Some people have a hard time with this because they're thinking, well, I'm selling the property as is. Doesn't mean I have to disclose. Yes, you do. If you have knowledge of defects, you still have to disclose. It just means you're selling it in its current condition with those problems, but you have to disclose the problems. You're not going to take care of those issues, but you still have to mention them. That's the as-is provision. Some people have a hard time with that specifically. And you'll see it in the next paragraph, well, on the next page, continuation of that. We already talked about information that's not material fact and does not have to be disclosed, like it's haunted, okay? I see dead people, right? Or any type of death, or illegal activity associated with the property. We talked about all of that in Unit 4. Now, you also have to disclose radon gas. You know what radon gas is? Radon gas is an odor. Check this out. This will scare you, but it's not really common. Radon gas is an odorless and tasteless, naturally occurring radioactive gas. It's light, lighter than air. It seeps through cracks in foundation and it rises. And if it builds up in a basement, which is usually where you see these types of issues, then in high concentration, exposed to it for a long time period could cause very serious health risks. But it's, first of all, it's not a common thing in Florida. You just have to have knowledge of it. And now they require a sale contract have a small disclosure of the hazards of radon gas, just so people understand what it is. Not that you have to get it tested, not that you're obligated for it, just here's the problem with radon gas if there's a problem. It comes from, it's like swamp gas, okay? It comes from the ground. It's a naturally producing gas, radioactive. Yeah. Have you heard of lead-based paint? It's paint that has lead in it. Why do we paint houses with lead? It lasted longer. It adhered better to what you painted it on. But there is also a conspiracy theory behind this as to why it existed and why it has since been removed. We know that lead is poisonous, right? And you have to ingest the lead in order for it to be poisonous. Well, who's going around eating paint? There's cases where kids and pets, after time, this paint becomes brittle and it flakes off. And it could hit the ground, become airborne dust. You can inhale it, you can eat it, all that stuff. But there's very few cases of this, as far as I know. It was not like a common thing for people to just be eating paint. Okay. But during the nuclear age, when there was a nuclear threat, radiation was a big deal. How do you protect your family from radiation poisoning? Lead. That's why, like when you get an X-ray, they give you the lead vest, and so it blocks radiation. Are you aware of this? So they believe that it was removed because not only did lead block radiation, it also blocked radio frequency and certain frequencies that penetrate through your body, while you're walking around, invisible frequencies that are all over that we just can't see, that could affect your health as well, right? And this conspiracy theory, I thought this was very interesting. It's so the government can have more access and infiltration of your homes, because now with your cell phone, if you have your cell phone in the room, the FBI, CIA, they can render a 3D image of the entire space, or shoot a radio frequency at the house and can create a 3D rendering of the entire space and see all the bodies that are moving within it. But if your house was painted with lead, then it prevents those types of frequencies getting in. So it's like privacy, right? Surveillance, control, and all these things, Not to scare you guys, but anyhow. So 1978 now requires the following bullet points. It says, whether you're selling or renting, you have to provide a disclosure, and you have to give them a certain time period to do their inspection. Yep.
Is this a date you remember?
1978, yeah. Prior to 1978, there was many houses that not only had lead-based paint, but also high probability that it had asbestos too. And we'll talk about asbestos later on. Yeah. Energy efficient homes. If you're selling it, well, not necessarily smart, but homes that are energy efficient, like it has good insulation, high SEER rating for their HVAC system, solar panels, energy efficient water heater, and so forth. All of these things contribute towards low cost of energy and so forth, but also being energy efficient. It has a very small footprint. And you need to disclose this to a prospective buyer that it is energy efficient, because it qualifies for certain loans, special loans. And they got to know about it beforehand so they could take advantage and be proactive of getting those special loans. So that's all it is. Just disclosing a home is energy efficient. Uniform system of rating energy efficiency, and it says requires buyers time or before of signing sale contract, receive information, brochure, notifying purchase, blah, 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 blah. We get it. Any questions about this? It's notification. It's disclosure. Probably one of the most important disclosures, besides the defects, the physical defects in the problem, is the HOA disclosure. Because having an HOA and the rules they impose and how much they charge could be a deal breaker to somebody. A buyer could look at the rules and be like, I don't want to agree. I don't want to live in this community, or see how much they charge per month or whatever, and be like, I can't afford this. This will be a burden on me. I don't want to buy if it's this amount per month. So that's why it's so important. We'll see right here. Florida Statute 720 requires that the HOA disclosure be given to a prospective buyer prior to them signing the sale contract. You'll see it here on these bullet points. Next page. It says the buyer should not sign unless they receive the HOA disclosure first. Otherwise, look at what it says here on line 10. Otherwise, the contract is what? Voidable. That means the buyer has the right to cancel the deal all the way up to the what? The closing. Because of your negligence because you forgot to do this. And you're going to take on the liability because you forgot to do this. It's going to be your fault. So you don't want that liability on your shoulders? Present it. Before they sign the sale contract, here's the HOA disclosure for you to review and sign off on. Okay, property taxes. Listen, guys, you're not a psychic. You don't determine what property taxes are. The county determines this. Remember, taxes are ad valorem. It means according to value. That means the higher the value of your property, the more taxes you what? Pay. You don't determine what that value is for tax purposes. The county determines that. So stay away from giving your opinion. Oh, next year, you're probably going to pay X amount of dollars in property taxes. Don't do that because that makes you liable. You told me that property taxes, now I see it's thousands of dollars more. Look, it says, caution, your buyers, don't rely on what the seller is paying for property taxes to determine what they're going to pay. Because remember, you can homestead your property and save money, right? So this person who's selling you the property, maybe they're paying $3,000 in property taxes because they homesteaded their property, I don't know, 15 years ago. And when you homestead, you actually lock in the rate, and they can only increase it very little every single year. We'll talk about this in Unit 18. So really, they should be paying more. But because they homesteaded 15 years ago, they're paying a lot less. So you're like, oh, the property taxes for this property, only $3,000? Don't assume you're going to pay the amount, because when you buy it, they're going to assess the value of that property for the current date, not 15 years ago. And you might be paying a whole lot more. Building code violation disclosure. We're almost done with this unit. Just bear with me, guys. Can you sell a house with a code violation? Look what it says here. The statute does not require the seller clear a violation before what? Yeah, but you got to know the procedure. You don't. But you got to disclose it. And you hand over any paperwork associated with it. That's right here. Look. Seller must forward to the code enforcement agency the name and address of the new owner with a copy of this disclosures to be given to the buyer within how many days of title transfer? 5 days. So after you close, within 5 days, you got to hand over all the paperwork associated with it. But a title search is going to reveal the code violation. It's recorded in a public records. If it's recorded, you'll see it. And you'll see, okay, there's a $10,000 violation for no upkeep of their property. The property's fallen apart and so forth. They got fined by the HOA, they got fined by the city, got fined by the county, whatever the case may be. You'll see that it's in public records. And I've purchased property with existing violations. I told you this, but I'll use it as a negotiation tool to get a better deal. You might not have heard of CDD. Development District, exactly. Let me explain what it is. It describes it right. It's actually right here, this first paragraph, but let me give you the short and skinny of it. A developer wants to construct hundreds of houses. If you want to construct hundreds of houses, that has an impact on the county utilities or the local utilities. Maybe the infrastructure for the electric company or the water company, they can't handle hundreds of more homes and processing water and providing them electricity. So if you want to build these 100 homes, you have to upgrade, you have to pay to help us upgrade our systems. And developers say, well, that's expensive. I don't want to pay that. So the developer can continue with their project without paying it. And they offset that cost by charging each homeowner. If you want to live in that community, you pay towards it. Every homeowner pays an annual amount to help cover those infrastructure costs. They call them impact fees and so forth. No, it's over a certain, it lasts long enough to pay for all of the upgrade for the infrastructure. water, utilities, whatever the case may be. So it does last for quite a bit of time. Usually, I mean, I just helped somebody purchase and sell that same property in St. Cloud, and it had a CDD. She was paying $1,800 extra on top of her property tax bill every single year for this development. You see how greedy the developer is? He's a developer and want to pay. It's like, oh, I charge the homeowner. But it has to be disclosed to you. You know about it beforehand. It's just frustrating paying it. And it lasts it was supposed to last for the next 25 years. And then after that, it drops off. In California, they give it a different name. In California, they call it Mello-Roos because the person who developed this concept named Mello-Roos. Anyhow. And our last subject of this unit, yes, our last subject, and then we'll be done with this unit, is misrepresentation and what? Yeah, there's a subtle difference between the two. Here's the thing. Misrepresentation can lead to fraud. But misrepresentation is either misstating information, misleading people with information, or leaving something out to make it completely truthful. You didn't necessarily lie, you twisted the what? The truth. And we all know how to do it, unfortunately. Like you tell your significant other, hey, I told you I was going out with my friends. I just didn't tell you where I was going with them. You didn't ask, I didn't tell, right? Or in real estate, it also, you'll see right here, exaggerate, conceal, misrepresent, making statements that are untrue. Exaggeration in our business could be like describing a property, making it sound a lot better than it actually is. It's the best view in the entire neighborhood. See fireworks from all the theme parks right here. So stay away from those types of descriptions, even though you see real estate agents using these descriptions all the time, right? Just be careful with this. If it's very opinionated, don't use it. Stick to the facts, okay? How do you know it's the best view in the entire community? Misrepresentation could lead to fraud. You'll see that on line 23. What is fraud? Fraud is straight out lying. It's lying. That's fraud. In real estate, to prove somebody committed fraud and hold them legally accountable for that, you might have to establish one of four things. Let's go through these. Number one, highlight this. The licensee lied. Could be difficult or easy, depending on the circumstance. Number two, you might have to prove that the licensee knew it was a lie when they said it. Wow. Is that easier or harder to prove? Proving that they knew it was a lie when they said it. Good luck with that. You might have to prove the third. You relied on the information that they lied about. That's easy. Say, I depended on their information to make an informed decision. And the last, in my opinion, it's the most important. Financial loss was caused because of the lie. Why do I believe that that's the most important? Because if nobody lost any money, was anybody truly hurt? Not really. Nobody lost any money, legally speaking. Nobody lost any money. Was anybody truly hurt? You have to attach some type of monetary loss. That's why people say it's pain and suffering, right? Even though it's like not actual loss of money. Well, you caused me mental distress or something like that. But you have to attach some type of monetary loss for it to be considered fraud. So if there's no loss, it's not what? It's not fraud. Any questions about this? And the last thing is fraudulent activity. Fraudulent activity is quasi-fraud. Quasi, yes, quasi. Quasi is what? Quasi mean? Kind of, yes. So it's kind of fraud. What does that mean? Well, there are activities, deceptive practices that are kind of fraud. And obviously they're prohibited, but let's go through the most important ones, the ones that we see on this list. Number one, which is actually something we'll talk about in Unit 12. If you're selling a property under a blanket mortgage, you must disclose this to a prospective buyer. If you're selling a property under a blanket mortgage, You must disclose this to a prospective buyer. I can explain it now, and it will save us some time in Unit 12. What does a blanket do? Yeah, it's one loan that covers multiple properties. Developers use these loans, right? Because they have multiple lots. They're separate properties, but all in the same development, covered under one debt because developers get loans to develop subdivisions. They don't use all of their own money. And there's lenders that offer this financing, so they take advantage of it. But if they sell you one of those lots that they're going to build on for you, construct a house on, then they have to have something called a partial release clause that says when you pay a specified amount for that lot, the lender will release the deed to you, ownership rights to you. That needs to be verified when you're selling these types of properties that are under a blanket debt, a blanket mortgage. If you don't, it's fraudulent activity. And on the next page, telling somebody, hey, listen, if you don't like this property, once you move in, come find me, I'll buy it back from you. Don't use that sales tactic. Listen, if you don't like it, I'll buy it back from you. Stay away from that. That's fraudulent activity. And lastly, these last two, no tricks, no games, no schemes, no raffles, no puzzles to win real estate. Not in Florida, you can't do it. Might be acceptable in other states. It might have sweepstakes and all this stuff to win a house, but you can't do it in Florida. Florida law says it's prohibited. It sounds like a great idea, but a sign in your front yard, raffle tickets are $500. If your name is picked at the end of the month, you win my house free and clear, but you can't do it for various reasons. You might sell more in raffle tickets than what the property is actually worth. You made $300,000 in raffle tickets, but the house is only worth $200,000. You can't do it. Any questions here? We're done with this unit. No questions? Let's take a break. Be back at 7:15. Okay, it's time. Let's get started with Unit 12. Yes, Unit 12, which is a great unit for us to focus on. Obviously, Unit 11 and 12 are important units. If you go back to that list of important units that I provided to you, 12 is one of them. And as we can see, the title itself should give it away. Introduction to mortgages, residential mortgages, financing. We know that financing is a lifeblood of sales. No financing, no sales. No sales, no real estate business. This is what caused the housing market crisis in 2008. It's because banks were not giving loans. We have to have an idea of what financing is and the process of acquiring financing, because 90% of the buyers that we're going to be working with are going to obtain a loan to purchase that property. And if you get another license, you could potentially make money off of that. What license is that? MLO, Mortgage Loan Originator's License. Remember that license. I'm telling you for a reason. Yes. So we're going to begin on page 276 with some loan instruments we should be aware of. The mortgage and the promissory note. Do you see that on line 9? Mortgage, promissory note? Okay. Most people have a misconception of what a mortgage actually is. A lot of people think that the mortgage is the money. Most people think that the mortgage is the loan that you're getting from the bank to purchase the property. It's not quite what you might think. The mortgage is the paperwork you sign as a borrower, used specifically to do what? Instrument that does what? Pledges as security or collateral for the debt. So that's what the mortgage actually is. Once again, most people think that the mortgage is the money you're getting from the bank to purchase the property. That would be the mortgage loan. But if we're saying what is a mortgage, it's the paperwork, the legal document you sign, used to pledge your property as collateral for the debt. What does that mean, though? Essentially, when you're pledging collateral, it's what makes it a secured loan. Have you ever heard of a secured loan versus an unsecured loan? It means that the loan is secured by collateral. That means if you stop paying, they can take something from you, right? Unsecured loan means it's just your promise, essentially, right? It's your personal guarantee that I'm going to pay you back. So that's why they go through all your qualifications to make sure that it's true what you're saying. They do obviously look at those things, but they take it one step further and say, if I'm going to give you the loan to purchase that property, you have to pledge that property as collateral. That means if you stop paying, we can take the property. It's what collateralizes the loan. That's how we describe it in our business. There is a term used to describe the action of you doing this. It's called what? Yeah, to hypothecate means to pledge. Hipoteca. Yeah, it might be pronounced differently, or they might call it something a little bit different in other languages, but it's still the same thing. It's pretty much the same thing. To hypothecate means to pledge, and that's what you're doing with the mortgage. Now, there's two parties in a mortgage, the mortgagor and the mortgagee. Yes. Who's the mortgagor? The borrower or the lender? Most people, once again, they fall back on that misconception. They think about who's giving the money. And you're thinking, oh, the lender's giving the money, so they must be the mortgagor. Remember, it's not about who's giving the money. It's about who's giving the pledge of property, who's giving the promise to repay the debt, the borrower. Okay? This is what helped me remember who the mortgagor and the mortgagee are. Can I share it with you? The mortgagor is the borrower who's always poor. And the mortgagee has the money. Yes. You got it? The mortgagor is the borrower who's always poor. And the mortgagee has the money. Any questions on this? So what is the borrower giving? The mortgagor, the borrower is giving mortgage as security, collateral, along with a promise to repay the debt to the lender. All right. Remember, there's two loan documents that we mentioned that we're going to discuss, not just the mortgage, but also the promissory note. They actually go hand in hand with one another. You can't have one without the other. And you'll actually see that, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, it's right here. I'm going to bounce around real quick. On line 11, a promissory note must accompany all what? Yes, you can't have one without the other. So what is the promissory note? You might remember this from a previous unit. Do you remember unit 7? When we talked about, I might give my tenant a one-time exception for paying partially for the rent that was owed, but in exchange, I'll get them to sign a what? Promissory note. So what is a promissory note? It's a legal IOU. It's a legal obligation to repay a debt to somebody. That's what this document is specifically used for. You'll see it right here. It says a note is a legal document, serves as evidence of a debt. And it says it's a promise to repay, makes the borrower personally liable for the financial obligation. Think of it as a legal IOU. Any questions about this? You'll see right here something interesting. The note is witnessed, is not witnessed, excuse me, it says, nor is it usually recorded, but it would be wise to always get it notarized, witness, stamp, signed, sealed by a notary public. Anyhow, let's move on. What is the note besides making you promise that you're going to repay the debt and holding you legally accountable for that? It also breaks down the details of the debt that you promised to repay. So what about the debt do we need to know that we promised to repay? It's on this list. It tells us the what? The amount of debt. Interest rate we agree to for the debt that we're repaying. Repayment method. Yeah, how long am I paying off this debt? And what happens if I stop paying? That's default. Any questions about this? We'll talk about default at the end of this unit. Are you with me so far? Okay. We discussed this already in unit 9. Do you remember lien priority? Which debts or what liens get paid off before others? Superior liens, junior liens. You were tested on that. But let's move on to line 32. You'll be tested on this. I think the name gives it away as to what it is and what purpose it serves. Satisfaction of a mortgage is exactly that. You're satisfying your debt. Okay, satisfaction of mortgage is a release of mortgage. Yes. Check this out. It says with this legal document, well, actually, once you satisfy your debt, the lender is required to record satisfaction of mortgage within how many days? 60 days, which would effectively remove, look what I'm highlighting, the mortgage what? Lien. So do you remember how it works? When you get the loan to purchase the property, you allow the lender to put what against your property? A lien, a mortgage lien, until the debt is satisfied. Once you satisfy, they must remove that mortgage lien. So then it would show in public records that that debt is paid off. Not necessarily that you own the property free and clear, because you might have other debts against the property, but at least that debt is satisfied, hence the name. Within how many days? 60 days. That's the rule. On page 279, this is interesting. Lien theory and title theory. Mortgage law. Lien theory, title theory. So we're going to discuss the difference between these two theories of mortgage, but what is it all about? Depending on what state you live in, your state could subscribe to either one of these theories of mortgage. I can tell you right now that Florida is a lien theory state, but what does that even mean? It dictates who holds on to the deed. You remember what the deed is, right? The legal document that shows your evidence of title, ownership rights. So depending on the theory will dictate who holds on to the deed while you're paying off your debt. Here in Florida, I mentioned we're a lien theory state. Like most states are lien theory states, which means who holds on to the deed while you're paying off the debt, the lender or the borrower?
The lender.
Who holds on to the deed while you're paying off your debt? Like Florida and most states, because we believe in lien theory, the lender is not going to hold on to the deed. It's the borrower. When you close on the property, just like I was able to pull up for your property when you purchase, I don't know if you have a loan or not. We didn't go that far into it. Well, I didn't pull up your property. Okay. But you're a property owner. So if I were to pull up your deed, even if you have a debt against it and you're paying off the debt, you'll see that the deed is recorded into her name because we live in a lien theory state. And in exchange for her holding onto the deed in her name, what is the lender allowed to place against the property? A mortgage lien. That's why we're a lien theory state. We believe that borrowers hold on to deeds. In exchange, the lender is allowed to put a lien. Liens are what? What is a lien? It's a claim for a debt that's owed. And we'll talk about at the end how they can enforce their claim if you default. You understand what I'm saying? If you stop paying, they're enforcing their claim. And we'll come back to the promissory note and the mortgage and how that takes place in default to enforce their claim. In very few states that subscribe to title theory, who holds on to the deed now? The lender, until you satisfy your debt. And once you satisfy your debt, if you live in a title theory state, which Florida is not, then they would sign the deed over to you, record it into public records. Yeah. I mean, it's smarter for the lender, right? It's more beneficial for the lender because if you stop paying, they basically just evict you because you never had a deed recorded into your name. They held on to the deed. Oh, you stop paying? That's fine. We just need to legally get you out of the property. But we already have the deed, so we're good there. Florida and most states that subscribe to lien theory, it's more difficult to complete this process to recoup the property, get the property back. If you're a lender and you have a borrower that defaults, but we'll talk about that at the end. Let's move on. What I'm skipping over, oh, well, you can highlight this at least on the next page. I'm going to skip over this, and there's a chart that summarizes it for us. The acceleration clause. We're going to be tested on that, obviously, but it's summarized for us on the next page, page 281 in the shaded box. Important mortgage provisions, clauses, stipulations that could exist within your mortgage documents. The agreements that you have between you as a borrower and the lender. So you need to be familiar with these because you need to have ammunition when you're getting financing. You have to be knowledgeable, understand what these clauses are to protect yourself. The acceleration clause, which is the one you're going to be tested on, class exam question, you're probably not going to like because it means if you default, the lender can accelerate the debt balance. So they say, okay, you stop paying, give me the remaining balance right now. Whatever you owe, pay it to me right now instead of 30 years, whatever. Does that make sense? Okay. The defeasance clause. Defeasance clause. I like to call it the defeating clause. Why? Because if you live in a title theory state, it requires a lender to do something when you pay off your debt. And that's to sign the deed over to you, right? That's in a title theory state, which Florida is not. If you live in a lien theory state, which Florida is, requires a lender to do something. And that's to remove the mortgage lien. Release the mortgage lien, right? Due on sale clause. You'll see this later on. You'll see it actually a couple other times. I want you to add this so you can have a better understanding of what it actually is. Write this before it. Debt to lender is due on sale. So the debt to the lender is due on sale. What do you think that means? Literally. That means upon sale, if you try to sell it or transfer ownership to somebody, the lender says, you can't transfer your debt to them. They can't take over your debt. You got to satisfy all the debt you have with me. So it would trigger the due on sale clause if you try to alienate yourself from title. I like to add this to it because this will help us understand something we're going to discuss tomorrow. Write this down. This clause, therefore, prevents assignment of mortgage. The due on sale clause prevents assignment of mortgage. Why? Well, did you know that debts could be assumed? Somebody else can take over your existing debt, take your position as the borrower. It does happen, but this clause would prevent that from happening because it says the debt to a lender is due on sale or transfer of title. So that means if you try to transfer ownership to somebody, they can't take over your debt. You have to satisfy all that. They have to get their own loan. We're not going to allow them to take over it. I'm just trying to be clear on it. Prepayment, you like, of course. That means you could pay off as early as you wish. If the lender does not want you to pay it off early, they'll impose a prepayment what? Why would the lender not want you to pay it off early? Exactly, because they'd be losing out on all that wonderful interest they can make off of you. Yeah, so that's the difference between these two. And the right to reinstate clause means, look up here. If the acceleration clause has started, that means you stop paying. The lender says, I want the remaining balance now. This clause allows you to get back on track. So it goes hand in hand with the acceleration clause. You basically pay some type of penalty or pay a fine to get back on track so you don't lose your property. Any questions here? Okay, let's move on. Mortgage features. I mean, this is straightforward, guys. Almost every mortgage loan requires that the borrower contribute a what? Yeah, minimum cash investment is what they also might describe it as. And that's negotiable, and it's also based on your qualifications. And lenders will use this calculation to determine how much. It's called LTV. Have you ever heard of LTV? Loan to value ratio. We'll come back to the math behind this, but for now, lenders use this to measure financial risk associated with lending and borrowing money. No, it's different, but we will talk about DTI. The higher the LTV, the more risk of giving you money. What does that mean? If the LTV is 95%, that means the lender is willing to give you 95% of the purchase price as a loan. They're willing to finance 95% of the purchase price. That means you only have to come out of pocket for how much percent? 5%. But if they're financing more of the purchase price, they're taking more of the risk, right? It's their money that they're using. So if that's the case, they might charge you something extra every single month called PMI. Have you ever heard of PMI? PMI's private mortgage insurance, which you're not going to like to pay. It's insurance to protect the bank just in case you stop paying. It's going to reimburse the lender. Yeah, we'll talk about it. Equity. You know what equity is? Equity is the difference between what it's worth and what you owe. If it's worth $500,000, but you owe $300,000 to the bank, what's your equity? $200,000, right? It's worth $500,000, but you owe the bank $300,000. The difference, just basic subtraction, is your equity. So you would have $200,000 equity. Now, some people choose to pull out this money in a large lump sum of cash. That's called a home equity loan, or little by little every single month. That's a home equity line of credit, HELOC. We'll talk about those later on. The whole point of giving you a loan is so the lender can make what off of you? Yeah, haram. All right, so interest is obviously the yield to the lender, their profit off of giving you the money. Whoever is servicing the loan is collecting your mortgage loan payments from you. Did you know that whoever originated the loan for you, whoever gave you the money to purchase the property, might not actually be servicing the loan? For instance, if you got a loan from Chase to buy the property, Chase might not be the company collecting your mortgage loan payments from you every single month. They might use a third-party company because they don't want to deal with that stuff. They don't want to deal with collection of payments, record keeping, notification, software, all that stuff. So there's companies that all they do is collect payments from people, give it to the bank, and they take a little percentage off of coordinating that transaction. Now, have you ever heard of PITI? I'm going to bounce around real quick. PITI stands for this. It's an acronym. Look what's on line 27. Principal, interest, taxes, and what? And insurance. This is what a common monthly mortgage loan payment consists of for a borrower. So let me explain the first two, principal and interest. But I need to get your attention so I can better explain it to you. I'll make it simple though. Your mortgage loan payment every single month will consist of at least these two parts, principal and interest. The principal is the portion of your payment. Let's say you're paying $2,000 a month. The portion of that $2,000 that's being applied towards principal is actually the part that's going towards killing the debt you have with the lender. Interest is the portion that kills you. Let me repeat that. Okay. So, but the way it works with amortization of a loan, amortization is where in the beginning of the loan term, when you first get the loan, the majority of that $2,000, that example, is going where? Towards principal or interest? Interest. And the lesser portion going towards actually principal, killing the debt. That's why people will make additional payments every single month, but apply that payment, they instruct the bank, apply this payment towards principal. And there's stats out there that studies where if you make at least one additional payment every single year, but apply it all towards principal, you'll kill your debt by like 5-7 years versus 30, right? So once again, principal is a portion that goes towards killing the debt, and interest is the portion that kills you. You get it? All right. Now, the other two parts, taxes and insurance, property taxes and homeowners insurance. The lender might not trust you to make those payments on your own. So they might require an escrow account that you pay towards every single month. Even though property taxes are not due every month, you pay at the end of the year, one large sum, right? The lender doesn't trust for you to pay that amount at the end of the year, because if you don't pay, you could lose your property, right? And where does that put the lender? So what they'll do is they'll charge you every single month to pay a little bit towards principal or taxes and insurance. And they'll put it in an escrow account. You know what an escrow account is, right? It's a separate business account used to hold on to other people's money. In this case, you're holding on to your contribution towards taxes, contribution towards insurance. And when those amounts become due, you have to renew your policy, your insurance policy. They'll pay for it on your behalf to make sure that you're covered. Some people like it because it's like peace of mind, right? I don't have to think about it at the end of the year and worry about making that large lump sum payment. I could just pay it a little bit every single month. Any questions? It depends. If they're financing a large amount, if you don't come up with a large down payment, then they might require it. Like me personally, I don't have to contribute towards taxes and insurance, but my situation is a little bit unique. I refinance and I put a little bit more down after the fact when I refinance and so forth. Anyhow, have you ever heard of lenders charging points in addition to your interest? They say, oh yeah, based on your qualifications, you're going to pay 5% plus 3 points. And you're like, what are these points? And what does those points actually mean? How much more money is it actually going to cost me? That's what you're really curious about. I'm going to show you the math behind this. You're not going to like it. Not because the math is difficult. Not because the math is difficult. The math is easy, but it will frustrate you to know what the lender's true intentions are. And the lender's true intentions, I think I mentioned this to you briefly. They want to make more money off of giving you the loan, originating the loan for you through points, fees, lender's charges, than interest by keep holding on to your debt and collecting interest off of you every single month. So that's traditional lending in your mind. Okay, they make interest off of me every single month. That's what they're in the business of. Not anymore. They're in the business of originating loans. They give you the loan. They collect 20, 30 grand off of you for giving you the money. They don't take that off of the debt amount. It's just to give you the $300,000 loan. Maybe they charge you $20,000, $30,000. And then what they do is they originate the loan for you and they immediately sell off that debt. So they pocketed 20, 30 grand off of you just for giving you that money, just for doing business with them. And then they sell off the loan that they gave you to get reimbursed that, and then they recycle that same money. So they like to charge points. This is a very common practice. Loan origination fees as well, like 1-2% of the loan amount. Anyhow, lenders will disclose this to you, but obviously borrowers, they don't know enough to fight back. That's the issue. And that's why I think this class is essential. Even if you're not getting a real estate license, this is stuff we need to know. So if you know somebody that's planning on purchasing a property, they need to know this stuff. Even if they're getting representation, they need to know. It's just that simple. We're coming back to LTV, and now we're going to see some math behind it. You're going to be tested on this for 2 separate questions. Hey, question 100, we made it. So here's the formula, but I made a handout for you guys. And I'm going to print up this handout if I didn't already provide it to you. Did I? Find out. LTV, loan to value ratio. Did you guys get it? I don't know if I printed it or not. You didn't get it? Okay, let me print it real quick. And you already have it? Oh, okay. Good on you. All right, for the rest of us, I'm going to print out. It was? What in the world? Wow. What a whirlwind. Wow. No, don't do that. Stop. AI. Okay. You're going to get the Tesla bot? So you have it or no?
Yeah.
Do you have it? Okay. All right, so this is the one that I want you to have in front of you, and I'm printing it. If you'll see it pop up there in just a moment, you can just grab it for you too. But for now, what is LTV? Yes, but LTV represents the percentage of the purchase price that the lender is willing to finance. I mentioned that to you. So if it's an 80% LTV, that means the loan is 80% of the purchase price. That means the down payment is how much percent? Yeah. So let's just say the loan is $300,000 and the property value or purchase price is $375,000. Can you do the quick math? Oops, I added an extra 0, excuse me. Go ahead and do the math. If the loan is $300,000 and the property value or purchase price $375,000, what's your LTV? Take 300 divided by 375. And what do you get? You get 0.8? Yeah, everybody should be doing the math. And yeah, you don't have to include all the zeros if you know about this type of math. 300 divided by 375, you'll still get the same ratio. And it's 0.8, which 0.8 is the same thing. Remember, this is a ratio, a percentage, same thing as what percent? 80%. 80% LTV. What does 80% mean? Once again, if I can be clear on this, it means, look up here, the loan, 300,000, is 80% of the what? Purchase price or value. That's it. That's all it means. But they might test you in a different way, and I want you to be prepared for this. This is some basic algebra. This is the first time we're going to encounter this, and this is basic algebra. This is not trigonometry or anything like that. And if you understand how to do this type of math, this is something you learn in school, then this is the most difficult your calculation will get. And you'll see how easy it is. Do you remember in school, we learned about the ABC formula, A times B equals C, for instance? And your teacher said, if you know at least 2 of those variables, you can calculate the missing variable every single time without fail, always. I'm going to show you that once again with how you might be tested here. So this alternative is used when working backwards to calculate the result. And this is how we're going to organize it. Purchase price or value times LTV equals a loan. And I'm going to fill in some information. We're going to fill in some variables. Let's just say, for instance, the LTV is 80%. That looks familiar. And the loan is 300,000. What is going on here? This is wild. I don't feel like I'm like the old video games. There you go. All right, hopefully that retains its power. Anyhow, so how do we work backwards to get the answer? Do you remember how to do this from school? If I can review with you guys real quick, this is the hardest your math is going to get. Once again, if you know two of the variables, you can calculate the missing variable every single time without fail. Check this out. What are we missing? Price. And our first step to calculate the missing variable is we must isolate what we're trying to solve for on one side of the equation. Do you remember what mathematical symbol separates the equation from the left to the right side? It's the equal symbol separates the equation. So look up here. This is the left side of the equation. Do you see that? And this is the right. Do you see that? Equal sign separates. And since the purchase price is on what side of the equation, left or right? Left, and we're trying to isolate it, what do we have to get rid of to isolate it? You have to get rid of, in this case, the LTV. How do you get rid of it? What your teacher said in school was to cancel it out on one side, the original side, you divide it by the same number. But whatever you do to one side, you must do to what? You must do to the other. So all you have to do is remember a rhyme to help you save some time. That's not it. Here it is. All you have to do, remember this is important, is simply slide and divide. Yes. Slide and divide. Exactly. And you'll get your result. So you'll find out that purchase price, which is now isolated by itself, one side of the equation, equals 300,000 divided by what? 80%. Do that math. Take 300,000 divided by 0.8 or 80%, and you get the purchase price, which is what? What a coincidence. 375,000. Are you with me on this? This is the hardest your math calculations are going to get. Are we good with this? We'll get a lot of practice with it. Trust you me. And for your homework tonight, you might see something similar, but let's move on. Let's go back to our textbook. And now I get to show you mortgage discounting and points. The thing that you're not going to like seeing just because it's frustrating how lenders take advantage of borrowers. Mortgage discounting and points. This is the one. And I'm going to print this as well for you guys. File, print.
Okay.
You have that one as well. Only 2 copies. There you go. All right. In your textbook, I want you to highlight this first paragraph. This formula goes hand in hand with it. I'm going to show you 2-point calculations. 2-point calculations. This is one of those calculations that you're highlighting. And then on the next page, this is the second calculation. But you'll see this for 2 separate questions. Okay. So now we can turn to this handout. I'm going to show you this one first, which is the second calculation that you highlighted just now. I'm going to show you that one first because I think it makes more sense if you do it in this order. So lenders, they base what your interest rate is based on your qualifications, essentially, your credit history, your credit score, and so forth. But they also might want to charge points. So your true interest rate might be 5%. But because they want to impose these points against you, generate all of this income off of you up front, or even more money throughout the loan term, they'll throw in these points. I'll show you how that might be calculated and might affect your true interest rate, which you really qualify for. It's going to make you sick. So let's just say your real interest rate is that 5%. But the lender wants to impose, let's say, 4 points. 4 points is our example. And the question is on your exam, calculate the lender's yield by points. What does that mean, lender's yield? Well, lender's yield is a lender's profit. You'll see right here. Every point will increase the lender's yield, which means interest, by 1/8%. Isn't that how the lender makes profit off of you, through interest? Okay, it's all the same thing. Yield, profit, and how they make profit through interest. So the fact that they're charging you 1 point is going to increase your true interest rate by 1/8%. That means they're going to impose 1/8% more higher on top of what you really qualify for. What? Just because you want to charge me points? Well, I don't want to pay points. Most people don't realize that they can negotiate not to pay the points. If your qualifications are strong, then you can negotiate, you can dictate most of these terms. Or you shop around until you find a lender not imposing points. Most people don't know about shopping around, but we'll talk about that in a moment. So let's convert. 4 points, what do you do with each point? Each point is 1/8%, right? In decimal form, 1/8 is 0.125. So all you have to do is multiply. So this is how it would look in your calculator. You take 4 and multiply, yes, by 0.125 as a percent. It's going to be 0.5%. Isn't 0.5 half? It's 0.5% increase on top of your true interest. So then when they present what they're willing to give you, they say, oh yeah, based on your qualifications and the fact that we charge points, you don't even know what points are at the time, we're willing to give you 5.5% throughout the 30-year loan term, 0.5% more based on the points that they want to impose against you. And when you do the math and find out how much extra you're paying over the 30 years, it's ridiculous, just by 0.5% more. So you fight back and you say, hey, listen, I know that I qualify for a lower interest rate. Why am I paying 0.5%? Oh, because we charge you these points. But what you can do is you can pay us up front to lower or remove the points, essentially. So they're either getting their money or they're getting their money, right? And this is how you would do the math to find out how much it would cost you up front to remove those points to bring down the interest rate. That's why this section talks about mortgage discounting, because you're discounting the debt. I'll show you. Let's just say the loan amount, by the way, here it is. It's called cost in dollars by points. Each point is equal to 1% of the loan, not the sale price. So this is how you remove points. They say, you want to remove 1 point? It's going to cost you 1% of the loan. You want to remove 2 points? It's going to cost you 2% of the loan. It's very simple math. And the conversion, it's a 1-for-1 conversion. It's not complex. So let's just say the loan amount, what's the example we've been using? 300,000? Let's use that, 300,000. And we want to get rid of all 4 points. So convert them. Each point is equal to 1%. So if it's 4 points and you want to remove all of them, it's 4%. 1 point, 1%, 2 point, 2%, 3 point, 3%, 4 points, 4%. 4% of the loan, and do the math. Take 300,000, multiply by 4%, and tell me what you get.
Yeah, that's the same number.
$12,000. So they're saying, give us $12,000 up front so we won't charge you that 0.5% on top of what you really qualify for. What are we talking about? but people don't know enough to fight back. And the fact that they're charging you points is just their preference. What you don't know is you can shop around to get the best rate and terms. And you'll find a lender that's not willing to charge you the points and give you just the percentage that you qualify for. But a lot of people think, oh, if I shop around, doesn't my credit score get diminished every time my credit is pulled for trying to finance with whatever lender? That's true for the first hard inquiry. When you submit your loan application for the first time and they pull your credit for the first time, yes, it affects your credit score by a few points. But the clock starts ticking from that point. You have 30 days to shop around, pull credit as many times as you want to find a lender that's willing to give you the best rate and terms. And what you'll find out when you shop around is that, yes, there are lenders out there that would just give you the 5% and not impose all these points on top of it. And if you make them, this is if you make them compete against one another. You think that, oh, because I have a bank account at Chase, anybody at Chase? Wells, BOA, anybody? Okay. You think that, oh, I have to give them the first shot because I have history with them. I have a bank account with them. Oh, they're probably going to give me more favorable terms. It's actually the opposite, because psychologically speaking, it's going to really hurt to hear this. Psychologically speaking, they know that most people don't realize that they can shop around. And they think that they can only get the loan from whoever they have a bank account with, because people have no financial literacy nowadays. And we leave school without building that financial literacy. So people think, okay, I guess this is what they're willing to give me, and I just have to go with whatever they're imposing because this is the best that I can do. It's false, and it's a misconception, and people need to wake up. Because of they know this psychology behind the average borrower, and they think they don't have any other options, they're going to hit you with the worst terms and rate. That's my opinion. That's what I'm sticking with. And statistically, there's studies that will back this up. And actually, something interesting. Every time your credit is pulled, the lender after that can see who pulled credit before them. So if you have a bank account at Chase and you want to give them the first shot to give you financing, a loan to buy your house, they can see that you didn't pull the credit with anybody else. And statistically, you're probably not going to shop around because you don't know any better. So they're going to hit you up. And then if you're smart, you shop around and then you find out there's more favorable terms out there in the lending world. And then you go back to Chase and you say, hey, they're willing to give me this. They say, oh, we can match it. Well, wait a second. I thought I've been banking with you for 10, 12 years. Well, there's no loyalty here. It's a game. It's all a game.
Like, obviously it happens, so it's
That's not regulated. That what I just described to you is not regulated. Disclosing that they're charging you whatever is regulated, but the average person doesn't even know. Did you know what points were? Did you know loan origination fees and how that works and so forth, and that they impose all the additional charges? No. People are just thinking, you're willing to give me the money I need to purchase this property. How much you want to, what's the monthly payment? Okay. And that's it. Can I afford the monthly payment? That's most people. It's just unfortunate. So at the least, if this course can open up your eyes and help you realize that this type of stuff is going on, this type of business practices actually exist, you can be more prepared and you have the ammunition when you try to obtain financing or help the people you care about most, right? If we go to page 285, we see assignment of mortgage, just like it sounds. When ownership of a mortgage is transferred from one company or individual to another, it's called assignment. Look, it's called assignment. It's just terminology, guys. But before you take over somebody's debt, you need to know what the debt balance is. What's the remaining balance? And that's by going to the lender and requesting something called an estoppel what? Or letter, yes. This is also used to verify if they're in good standing with their HOA. Condo association, HOA, and so forth. Okay. Go to page 286. And we see methods of purchasing property encumbered by an existing mortgage loan. So let's talk about these two. The first is called assumption. Didn't we just discuss this? Assignment, assumption. Somebody taking over your debt. They're taking financial responsibility for the debt from that point on. That's all this is. It's assuming taking over somebody else's debt. Look what it says. Execute the promissory note, become primary liable for the debt. It says, however, there needs to be a novation agreement. Do you remember the novation agreement? You'll even see it here. If the seller wants to be completely free from the original mortgage loan, the seller, buyer, and lender must sign the novation agreement. It's to substitute a new borrower for the original borrower. We talked about this in Unit 11 with assignment of contract, assignment and novation. We saw that in Unit 11. But then we come across something described as sub 2. Sub 2 lending or sub 2. It says subject to an existing mortgage, purchasing a property subject to an existing debt. Lenders, actually investors have been promoting this a lot and have made this popular as of recently. What they do is they go to a homeowner that maybe can't afford to continue making their mortgage loan payments. And the investor says, I'll take over your mortgage loan payments. But I don't want to take your position as the original borrower. I just want to have a contract with you that says, I'll make those payments for you on your behalf because you can't afford it. Probably because there's a due on sale clause. You remember the due on sale clause? The debt to a lender is due upon sale or transfer of title. So if they have the due on sale clause, I can't take over your debt. I can't completely take over it. So you have to stay in place as the original borrower, but I have a contract that says I'll make your payments every single month to the lender on your behalf. You sign the deed over to me, get out of the property, and what the investor will do is they'll find a tenant willing to pay more in rent than the mortgage loan payments every single month. So if the mortgage loan payments are really low, the investor's winning, right? If the mortgage loan payments every single month are $900, but the rent they can get is $2,000, they're thinking, I don't have to take over I don't have to get a loan. I just take over your payments. You sign the deed over to me. I get a tenant inside. You're happy because I'm making those payments on time for you every single month. I'm building your credit, right? But there's also a negative side of it, right? The negative side is, what if I stop paying as the investor? Then the agreement is I have to sign the deed back over to you, but then you're right back in the original position. So what's the best option for you as a homeowner who's in this situation, can't afford it? Sell the property. Yeah, sell the property. Contract for deed. I've done this before. Contract for deed is like a title theory state. You remember title theory state? Look what it says. The buyer agrees to purchase property, typically makes a small down payment, pays monthly payments of principal and interest to the seller. The buyer takes possession of the property at closing. However, instead of receiving a deed, the purchaser receives a contract for deed, giving the buyer equitable title in the property. Equitable title means they can use it as if they're the owner, but their name is not on the deed. If you go to page 287, highlight this on line 2. So what happens? This is like a title theory state. The seller retains legal title to the property until the buyer has repaid the debt. You remember a title theory state? Florida is a lien theory state, but as the owner of the property, you can offer seller financing, and you can also do this as well. So I'll give you an example of you and I. For instance, I am going to be your lender. You're the buyer on the seller, but you maybe don't qualify for traditional financing with the bank. Maybe you're self-employed and you don't pay yourself consistent income every month. So you can't show that on your taxes. And if you can't show it on your taxes, the lender's not going to give you financing. and you want to pay as little as possible in taxes every single year to the IRS. You play the game, you claim all your deductions and everything. But it's a double-edged sword. When you try to get financing, it's going to show on your tax returns like you don't make any money, even though that's not the case. You just write off as much income as possible. So you come to me and you say, hey, listen, can you finance the purchase of it rather than me? Because I really want your property. I say, yeah, I'll do it, but we'll do it as a contract for deed. So it's like a title theory state. Since you want me to be your lender, I'm going to hold on to the deed until you pay off the debt with me. And all the terms and interest rate, all of that is negotiable. Down payment, interest rate, how long you pay until maybe we do a balloon payment after 3 years, whatever's left, you have to pay me the remaining balance. Cause maybe I don't want to wait 30 years to get all of the debt paid back. Maybe I want to get back my money sooner. Anyhow, let's continue to, we talked about this. Land development loans, construction loans. Remember, developers use loans to construct subdivisions, just so you're aware of that. That's what a construction loan is. It's like a bridge loan that rolls into permanent financing. We talked about blanket mortgage loans, right? Takeout commitment means that a lender gives a commitment that they're going to offer permanent financing. And buy down. Buy down is interesting. Developers, sometimes what they do is, as an incentive to buy new inventory homes, they'll say, hey, listen, interest rates are high right now, because they are, right? What we'll do is we'll pay the lender to buy down your rate, and it's a temporary buy down so you can get your foot in the door, qualify for financing. If interest rates are very high, it might disqualify you from getting the loan, because it means the mortgage loan payment every single month is higher. If the interest rate is higher, your payment every single month is higher. And maybe you can't afford it. But if the interest rates come down, you can afford it, right? So the developer says, what we'll do is we'll pay our preferred lender we'll pay them to buy down your rate temporarily, so you can qualify based on the lower interest rate up front, but over the years, it's going to slowly go back up. It's a trick. It's a trick of the trade to make more borrowers qualified for purchasing homes that you're selling. Anyhow, every year. Yeah. Eventually it'll catch up to whatever the current interest rates are. So maybe interest rates are 7%, but they buy it down to 5% or 4.5%, whatever. And then over the years, it goes back up to that 7%. Yeah. So you qualify based on the lower rate. So you can get your foot in the door, get the loan, purchase the property, but with the intention it's going to go up. And our last subject of this unit is what? Yes. So let's review some things we talked about in the very beginning of this unit. We said, as a borrower, there's 2 loan documents you should be familiar with. As a borrower, you sign the mortgage. What's a mortgage?
Instrument.
Legal document, yes. Used specifically to pledge the property as collateral for the debt. It's what collateralizes the debt. It's what makes it a secured loan. It means if you stop paying, they can take some collateral, the property from you. So like a car loan. You stop paying on the car loan, what's collateral? The car. Okay. So you got the mortgage and you got the promissory note. So what if you stop paying? That means you broke your promissory note, your promise to repay, and they have all the documented evidence of that and notification that they've made to you. And then they turn to the mortgage that says, because you broke your promise, we can take the what? We can take the property. So how they do this is they file a lawsuit against what that's attached to your property until the debt was paid off. What was attached to your property? A lien, a mortgage lien. So they're basically filing a lawsuit to enforce the mortgage lien attached to your property. And that's what foreclosure is known as. It's a judicial process. You gotta have to go through court to resolve foreclosure. It doesn't happen overnight. And people try to delay it as much as possible. You'll see it right here. In Florida, it's a judicial process. Got to go to court. And this is exactly what I just mentioned to you. Initiate lawsuit on the promissory notes, the mortgage lien attached to your property, they're enforcing that. Anyhow, it's not the end of the world. You can pay to get back on track all the way up to the date when they try to sell your property off, auction off your property, foreclosure sale. It's called equity of what? Keyword redemption. You're redeeming yourself. You're paying to get back on track so you don't lose your property. What's the result from foreclosure on page 289? What do they do with your property? Yeah, most likely they'll auction it off. Who will host this auction? It's usually the county in which that property is located. I attend these auctions all the time. Foreclosure auctions. Anybody can register, but you really got to know what you're doing in foreclosure auctions because you can get your shirt handed back to you real quick. You have to do research on the property. This one, you're buying the property the way it is. That's one risk. But then also, you're assuming the responsibility for potentially other debts that they have attached to the property. Superior debts, superior liens.
Where's your point based off like a photo? Property? No?
You can't go inside the property. That's another. But here's the thing. For instance, because I attend these auctions frequently, I see tendencies that people make, and especially unexperienced bidders. And what they'll do is I'll see two bidders battling against one another to buy what they think is buying property through foreclosure sale. But what they're really doing is they're paying off an HOA debt. So HOA, if you stop paying them, they can foreclose. And they'll send it to foreclosure auction, just like a bank would, for that type of debt, right? So what happens is you think you're getting a real great deal on the property. There's a reason why people are not bidding against you and going up to what the property is actually worth with maybe a little bit of room for profit. It's because what you're doing is you're paying off the HOA debt, but there still might be a mortgage loan attached to the property. And eventually, I mean, if that person couldn't pay their HOA, you think they're paying off their mortgage loan debt? No. They lose the property. They're going to default on the mortgage loan, and the bank's going to come knocking and say, well, you're the new owner now. You're responsible for paying us. And now you're on the hook. You thought you got a great deal. You paid off the HOA debt. You thought you got the property for $100,000. Really, you got the property. You just paid off the HOA debt. Now the bank wants the remaining balance. Maybe it's $300,000. And they say, you owe the $300,000. Otherwise, we're going to take the property. We're going to foreclose again. And then you're out $100,000.
So they don't disclose any of that information?
No, none of that. You got to know this. So then you see two idiots that think they're buying the property, they're paying off the mortgage loan debt, but really they're paying the HOA debt off, and they're battling between one another, and they, get that property up to maybe close to what it's worth. Whoever got left holding the bag is really holding the bag.
Research on the lien share?
Yeah. So in the past, when I didn't have a baseline knowledge of how to look up information about the property, I teamed up with the title company, and I built a relationship with them over the years. I would bring business to them. Whenever I have a closing, I would bring it to them as much as I could, or I'd recommend them. And they were familiar with me. We had that relationship. So I said, hey, listen, I'm going to continue to bring you these transactions as much as I can. But in exchange, I want you to do free title searches for me for investment properties that I'm going after in auction, and just give me your opinion of title. And they would do that for me. And title companies would be willing to do this for you if you have that type of relationship. But then over the years, I got good enough to look it up myself. And I do the same type of research that a title company does, but I don't have to pay them or ask them for favors or wait for them to come back to me and say, hey, it's going to take us a few days. No, I want to know right now because the auction is coming up. I got to be prepared, There's 4 departments that you need to be able to, you have access to. It's public records, but you have to know not just be able to find the information, but know what you're looking at. That's the most difficult thing, because all these legal documents is, hundreds of pages of stuff associated with the property. You got to be able to parse through it and be like, okay, this is important, this is not important. How much is their debt? Do they have a second mortgage loan against the property? Is there a lien against the property? Is there code of violations? You can see that all in public records. So it's property appraiser is one of them. I'll use that resource. The clerk of courts, the tax collector, and the comptroller. Yeah. So every county has those departments: clerk of courts, property appraiser, tax collector, comptroller, COMPTROLLER, comptroller. Clerk of courts, appraiser, county property appraiser, tax collector, and comptroller. Yeah. Even if you just Google it, public record search Orange County, they'll take you to the comptroller's website. Yeah. Anyhow, result from foreclosure. How long does foreclosure stay on your credit report? 7 years. 7 years. And what they'll do is they'll auction off your property. What if there's a surplus? You'll see right here, surplus funds. What if there's a surplus? What if they sold it at auction for more than what you owed to them? You owed 200,000, but they sold it at auction for 300,000. What do they do with the remaining balance? Well, they're gonna try to absorb as much as they can in legal fees. I'll tell you that right now. If you look at how much they charge for legal fees, it's ridiculous. There's no way that filing foreclosure costs that much, but they don't want to leave any meat on the bone. If there is a remaining balance, the county is supposed to hold it for the mortgagor to come and pick it up. Mortgagor is the borrower who's always poor. You got it. And what if they sold the property for less than what you owe? God bless you. You see, any excess proceeds are to the mortgager. But if they sell it for less than what you owe, imagine you owe 300,000, but they sold it at auction for 200. They could come after you for the remaining balance. Basically, they would file a lawsuit against you for the remaining balance. And they try to get a deficiency judgment against you. It's going to be a black cloud over your head, and it's going to follow you wherever you go. So here's the issue with that. If you don't have enough money to save your property from foreclosure, you lost your property, you think you're going to have an extra $100,000 lying around to pay off this deficiency judgment? Probably not. And it's probably going to lead to the big B, which is what? Bankruptcy. Bankruptcy stays in your credit report for how many years? 10 years. And then you become a pariah to any lender. Good luck trying to get financing. Short sale. A lot of people have a misconception of this. They think it's a quick sale. No. Short sale is when you're selling it for less than what you owe to the bank. So you're going to the bank and saying, hey, listen, I bought the property at the peak of the market. My property's not worth that anymore, but I need to sell it right now. So can you allow me to sell it for market value, which is actually less than what I owe you? And you forgive me for the difference. That's what a short sale is. If we're talking about time to complete a short sale, it should be called a long sale, because it takes, an upwards of 6 to 9 months to get bank approval for any offers that you get on your property through short sale. It goes through corporate and all this stuff. You'll see details of that here if you want to read through it later on tonight. Deed in lieu of foreclosure. You basically sign your deed over to the bank and walk away. Yeah. Is there any such thing as a friendly foreclosure? So you basically, if you know you're going to be in default, you're going to eventually lose the property, you can be proactive and go to the bank and agree to sign the deed over to them in exchange for them forgiving the debt. You sign over the deed, walk away. You're giving a deed in lieu. What's in lieu? This is French. In lieu. In lieu. In lieu. In lieu, in place of. Yes, it is French. In lieu, deed instead of a foreclosure is what it means. You're signing the deed instead of, if foreclosure has already started, it's too late for this. If you're already in default, you can't use that option. What's the best option for somebody though? Is it to sign your deed over and walk away? Is it sell the property, man? Anyhow, what if you have an income producing a rental property that you stop paying your debt on? So you got a loan to purchase a rental property and you stop paying the bank. Do you think that the lender would find it acceptable for you to continue collecting rental payments from all your tenants, pocket the cash, and not give the lender anything? No. So what they'll do is they'll usually include a receivership clause, allows the receiver appointed by the bank to collect rent, any income the property is producing from tenants. You want to find out if a property is in default? This is what's recorded in the public records. Lis pendens. It's Latin. It means action pending. It's a lawsuit. It's a warning that a lawsuit has been filed. In this case, mainly used to describe foreclosure lawsuit. Because remember, that's what they're doing. They're filing a lawsuit against a mortgage lien. That's what foreclosure is all about. And I know real estate agents, well, at least I mentioned this and they take my advice and they're very successful with it. Real estate agents, to get more listings, they go into public records and look for all the properties in the county that have lis pendens filed against them. And they find ways to contact those homeowners to ask them if they would like to list their property, because if you're in foreclosure, the best option is to sell it, right? Yep, they do that as well. And probate as well. Yes. Yeah, you can. Yeah. So you just, but you need to coordinate with the lender and tell them, hey, listen, I have it listed for sale. If you can give me more time and blah, blah, blah. And then they'll probably give you up to a certain amount of time before it's like, hey, listen. Yeah. Any questions here? No questions? Alice? Okay. We're done with our session. So with that being said, push in your chairs, clean up your mess, drive safe. God bless. I will see you mañana.
Have a great night.
In an era where online education often falls short, there's an oasis transforming the digital learning landscape. Welcome to Cameron Academy. With our AI-powered platform, we're not just changing the game, we're rewriting the rules. At Cameron Academy, we're not just elevating education, we're lifting learners to new heights. Our comprehensive video lessons and AI tutors simplify complex real estate concepts. At Cameron Academy, we do more than prepare you for your exams. We equip you with the essential knowledge for a successful career in real estate. Break away from the traditional. Think computerized exams, a convenient study app at your fingertips, and AI support, but wait, that's not all. Live chat support when you need it, AI-driven text-to-speech content, your own personal AI tutor, and instant online certifications. This isn't just education. This is the future. We're reimagining what it means to ascend to success in the real estate industry. Choose Cameron Academy, the oasis of innovative learning. Your journey to success starts here.